Thanks, everyone. Good afternoon. It is 12:01, Thursday, December 8th, 2022, and I'm calling to order the virtual meeting of the Los Angeles Probation Oversight Commission. I am Frankie Carrillo. I'm the chair of the commission. I'd like to start today by welcoming the newest member of the commission, Melinda Kakani. Supervisor Holly Mitchell appointed Commissioner Kakani, and the board approved her nomination this Tuesday. Those of you who have been participating in the POC meetings have all heard her voice many times in public comments and on panels, and we are glad to have her join us as a member of the commission. I will let Commissioner Kakani introduce herself, but I'll start by saying that, among other reasons, we are delighted to have another former public defender join the team, given the departure of Commissioner Nong and Yamashiro. And we're thankful to have Millie, who is part of the Los Angeles Youth Uprising through her work as Children's Defense Fund. We look forward to working with you. Millie, would like to say a few words?
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Commissioner Carrillo, or shall I say Chair Carrillo. I don't have a ton to add except that I am honored to be here, and I look forward to working with you all and representing the 2nd District in creating and supporting oversight and accountability with the Probation Department as it impacts adults and young people throughout LA County. Thank you.
Thank you, Millie. Wendy, Wendy. Now, Wendy Julian, our executive director, will explain how you can participate during this meeting, and then she will call the roll. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Chair Carrillo. Welcome to the Probation Oversight Commission meeting, and thank you for joining. We really want you to participate in our meeting. We've set up our meetings to allow for that in the most robust way possible. We want you to participate live. We want you to participate if you're calling in, or if you want to make a comment without speaking or make it anonymously, you're welcome to send us an email. The way we're going to do this is we'll go through each item on the agenda. Chair Carrillo will introduce the item. There'll be any presentation that we have, and then we'll go to public comment before the commissioners discuss and make any decisions on the item. So there are a few ways to make live public comment. If you pre-registered, we'll call your name first, but also please raise your hand so it's easier for us to find you. If you want to speak on an item but did not pre-register, just use the little raise your hand function. On my computer, it looks like a little hand at the bottom of the screen. On some computers, you have to press the 3 dots to get the little hand or the reactions. And then if you're calling in on your phone, you dial *3, and that raises your hand next to your phone number. So we'll be able to call on you. If you're having any trouble, just send a chat message to the host, and one of our, Janae or somebody who's in the background will be able to help you get connected. So if you're calling on the phone, and I think sometimes even on the computer, once we unmute you, you have to unmute yourself. On the phone, you do that by pressing *6. Everybody's going to have 2 minutes today, unless the chair determines otherwise, based on how many commenters we have. And again, if you want to send us a message in writing, send us an email to info@poc.lacounty.gov. That's in the chat. Please don't send your public comment in the chat. Only the host will see it, and it's not logged as public comment because the chat function doesn't comport with the Brown Act responsibilities. Our meeting is being broadcast live, as Janae said, on the Facebook page. You can watch on Facebook Live, but there's no engagement with users. You can also follow our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at LA County POC for lots of information about upcoming meetings and educational content. Please follow us and invite others to attend our meetings and follow. We also have launched a YouTube account where you can watch really helpful recaps of the full meeting or of specific areas of the meeting. Le damos una cordial bienvenida a personas en esta reunión que prefieren hacer sus comentarios públicos en español. Les daremos 4 minutos en vez de 2 y podemos proveer traducción, o usted puede proveer su propio traductor. Al iniciar su comentario, nomás avísenos que prefiere hacer su comentario en español y va a usar la función de levantar la mano, la manita que está abajo, para indicar que quiere hacer su comentario. I'm going to call the roll. Commissioner Dolores Canales?
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dupuy is absent today. Commissioner Sean Garcia-Lays?
Present.
Commissioner Shay Jackson?
I am here.
Commissioner Melinda Kakani, and welcome.
Thanks, and I'm here.
Commissioner Sam Lewis is absent. Commissioner Don Meredith will be joining us at approximately 1:30, and I'll let you know, Chair Carrillo, when he joins. Commissioner Nong is absent, and Chair Frankie Carrillo.
I am here.
Okay, great. Thank you. We do have quorum and I will pass it on to you.
And I just want to mention, I am here, but I'm also a little bit under the weather and in New York City. So if you hear me coughing or wondering what's that stuff behind me, it's just a hotel room. So moving on now to agenda item number 2. Thank you, Wendy. Item number 2 is to approve the approval of November 14th and 16th special meeting minutes. Do we have any written public comments or live public comments to this item, Wendy?
No written public comments or pre-registered. I don't see any hands up, so I think we can move on.
Gracias, Wendy. Can I have a motion by the commissioners to approve November 14th and 16th special meeting minutes?
Motion to approve?
We have a motion by Commissioner Canales, seconded by Commissioner
Jackson?
Jackson. Thank you, ladies. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves and vote with a voice vote. Aye.
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 Sounds like motion carries. Thank you. Moving on now to item number 3, in which we will open the floor for nominations for the position of Chair, Vice Chair, and Secretary of the POC. Wendy, will you please explain the process?
I can find the unmute button. Yes, thank you. So the POC's ordinance very specifically outlines the election of officers, and we also defined it more clearly in our bylaws that were voted on in February and March of 2021 when the POC started. It requires the election of 3 officers every year, which is the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. And it requires those to be elected at our annual meeting in January. That's a little bit strange because we had our first meeting in February, but as many of you recall, we actually didn't end up electing a chair for a couple of months after that because we had one commissioner out and we had a 4-4 tie, and then ended up electing Chair Carrillo to be the chair, and he served a year in that chair role and then was reelected in April of this year, but to serve a term that expires in January. So while generally the only restriction on the number of terms that a person can hold is 2 for the chair, in this case, we are shortening the term just by a couple of months in order to comply with the ordinance for January. So today we're taking nominations and we'll be holding elections in January as described. And so let me know who would like to nominate themselves or others for the positions of chair, vice chair, or secretary. I see your hand, Dolores. Chair Canales.
Yes, well, welcome to our newest commissioner. I apologize, I didn't say it earlier, but I'd also like to nominate Commissioner Shay Jackson as chair, but I did not talk and consult with her, so I'm hoping she would accept that though.
I will gladly accept. Thank you, Dolores.
Thank you, Commissioner Canales, Commissioner Jackson. Any other nominations for chair?
Now, Wendy, I have a question because I'm wondering, I mean, are we going to have discussion after the fact? Should we just do nominations and then discuss, or should
I think we should do nominations and then have discussion. Yes. But I think if you have a question, in particular, a question that might be a question for Alex, it's okay to bring it up now.
Yeah, I do think the timing is a little awkward in that we have open positions. I like to have a better sense of who the full body of commissioners is going to be before we vote on officers. And so my question is, does the ordinance allow for like, maybe not vacancies? I personally don't care for vacancies, but like interim, like filling an interim versus like that being permanent and maybe having, I'm not sure how that would work, but I'm just wondering if it could be more temporary until the full POC is in place.
I am going to turn this over to Alex because I don't know the answer to that question. I know it very clearly states that the elections are supposed to be in January, and we may need to come back to you on something like that. But Alex, do you know the answer to that question?
That's something I'm going to have to look into a little bit further before I provide a definitive response.
Okay. I mean, because I personally feel that with us wanting to consider at-large members, it would be a great opportunity for them to serve in this capacity. And so just, opening the door for that and maybe delaying this slightly, I would happy to be the chair, but, for the other positions, if.
Well, I think maybe I will say something that Alex, please correct me. There is no requirement that we take nominations in December or that we take nominations at all necessarily. The nominations isn't really a part of the process.
Mhm.
So we certainly could not take nominations either on we've already have one nomination for the chair position, but for the other two positions until January and actually do the elections with the nominations. We've done it that way before. Alex, do you have any thoughts about that?
I agree, Wendy. I think that would be fine.
Go ahead, Sean.
I have not gotten any updates on how the search for the at-large members is going, but I would be shocked if we have 2 new members at our January meeting.
I would say that is not a possibility, that we would have the 2 new members by the January meeting. We don't have as many applications as I might have expected. And because the process will include both, well, first of all, it doesn't close until the 15th, and then we'll include both interviews and eventually a nomination to the board that has to be agendized on the board calendar. It certainly will take weeks, which already puts us past the January meeting.
Well, I'd be in favor of postponing nominations to the January meeting, but I don't know if that brings us closer to a decision. So,
Chair Carrillo? We can't hear you. Oh, you're on mute. I thought you had taken it off. There we go.
You know what? I did. Thank you. It's the New York time change. I know the agenda went out to everyone, but did anyone reach out to either Don or Sam to see if they wanted to either nominate themselves?
I did not. That is a good question.
Okay. I think we should proceed with this nomination. I'm not sure if we have to get a vote on that, but majority of people who either saw the agenda and either just didn't think they wanted to participate. I assume Sam is busy, but I assume if he wanted to nominate himself, he would have checked in with someone. And second of all, as Sean's alluded, the vacancies will be vacant in January regardless. So if we can get some names out there today, it would be helpful. And we have one out of 2 so far, out of 3.
What I think we could potentially do is say that we're taking nominations today, and that we could take additional nominations before the actual elections in January. And also in that time, Alex can get an answer for us on whether we have an option to postpone it beyond January. How does that sound, Alex?
That sounds fine, Wendy.
So do we have any other nominations today for chair, vice chair, or secretary? Go ahead, Commissioner Canales.
Yes, so I was thinking, why don't we, if we can, if possible, maybe just nominate Commissioner Kakani today as vice chair and Commissioner Sean Garcia-Lays as secretary, and we've got a full body and it's all resolved and voting passes today should they accept.
I am happy. Well, actually, I should say Commissioners Kakani and Garcia-Lays, do you accept those nominations?
Yes.
Yeah, I accept.
And I do think we are required to wait until January to actually hold the elections, though, Commissioner Canales. Go ahead, Commissioner Jackson.
yeah, I like the idea of, kind of making things happen quickly, but I will say that I'm hoping that with this process comes like full descriptions of the officer positions before we vote. So those who have been nominated have a clear sense of the job that's in front of them, right? And so we're just all on the same page about what that entails. And I think January would be nice. It just gives you some time to really think about it. So.
Right. We will not be telling anyone who's running for the secretary position that they're taking over Janae's role in doing the minutes. They'll only be approving the minutes. Commissioner Canales, go ahead.
Yes, and the reason that I nominated them is because I know Commissioner Kakani, prior to becoming commissioner today, has been fully involved in all the meetings that have been taking place that we've been having. And then, of course, Commissioner Garcia Leyes has been with us from the beginning, from the beginning of the process. So I felt confident that they both knew the roles and could definitely stand in those roles.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jackson, I think it's a great idea for me to provide a reminder to all the commissioners about what the roles entail. I will say, as a group, it entails agenda setting for the 3 officers and also some representation of the commission at different events, in particular for the vice chair position. The secretary position has another role that Commissioner Canales has not had to do because it's regarding the planning of meetings and helping us to select sites and promote community engagement as we go back to the in-person meetings. So during all of Commissioner Canales' tenure, we've been in the virtual space, but we certainly will be leaning on the secretary for support and ideas about how to best locate the meetings going forward. Okay, any other nominations? So I think
Yeah,
what we should
sorry.
do, I think we should go ahead,
And
Commissioner Garcia Leyes.
I would like to nominate Frankie for both vice president and secretary. And if I'll give my speech, which is he did such a great job as chair. I would like to see some consistency if he's willing to stay on. Although Wendy, you bring a lot of consistency across, but still, I would like to nominate and have him at least be considered to stay on the executive team.
Chair Carrillo, how do you accept that nomination?
Sean, you're too generous with your words. I will decline. I think it's definitely time for it's time to shuffle the deck. We'll leave it there. But I'm still obviously a commissioner, so I appreciate that, Sean.
Thank you. Anything further for nominations? Yes.
I'm reluctant. Oh, should I raise my hand?
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I came with, nominees in mind, but I feel reluctant to do that because it almost feels like, I haven't consulted with anyone first, and I feel a little bit bad about that. And to be very honest, I was thinking about voting for Millie to be vice chair, especially considering that there was a whisper that I might be nominated as chair. I thought that we would be a great team, especially considering how engaged she's been and what force I think she brings to the POC. Just think that would be complementary and powerful. And so I will move forward with that nomination, Millie. I know that we're all kind of working professionals and we're busy, and it doesn't really boil down to competency. It's really a matter of capacity. Do we have the ability to take this work on in the way that it sort of deserves? So I'm saying all that to say I would like to move forward with nominating Millie to be vice chair. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. I think what we should do at this point is take public comment on this and then entertain a motion from the commission to accept these nominations. So if you would like to make public comment on this topic, please use the raise your hand function or email, send a message in the chat or dial *3 on your phone. But I don't see any public comment. So I'll actually hand it over back to you, Chair Carrillo, if you want to take a motion to accept the nominations of Commissioner Jackson for chair, Commissioner Kakani for vice chair, and Commissioner Garcia Leyes as secretary.
So I will echo those exact words and consider that the motion. So if someone can second that, I would appreciate it.
I second the motion, Commissioner Canales.
Thank you, Commissioner Canales. And is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion. Wendy, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, so we're voting to accept the nominations. So we'll begin with Commissioner Canales. Commissioner Canales, we can't hear you. Sorry, we're voting yes or no on the motion to accept the nominations.
Yes, yes.
Thank
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Garcia Lays,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kakani,
Yes.
and Chair Carrillo.
Yes.
Okay, and the motion passes, and I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Next, we will take up item number 4, which is to discuss and take appropriate action on the meeting frequency of the Los Angeles County Probation Oversight Commission and plans to return to in-person meetings. As you know, we are a commission governed by the Brown Act, and we expect to have to return to in-person meetings in 2023. Based on the governor's emergency orders, we can continue to meet virtually through February, and then we'll convene in person. For members of the public, we are working on ensuring that we still have an effective way for people to join our meetings virtually so that we can continue to enjoy the levels of participation we have had over the past 2 years. Staff drafted some dates and times for us to begin the conversation. In the attached document that you will see on the screen, actually up already, you will see 2 options for our regular meetings. On our January and February meetings will remain virtual. And if you agree, we can leave those meetings on the 2nd and 4th Thursday from 12 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Going forward to in-person meetings, option 1 is to continue to meet as we are now, with 2 meetings per month for 2.5 hours from noon to 2:30 on the 2nd and 4th Thursday. This includes an option of having 1 4-hour meeting in both November and December due to the Thanksgiving Christmas holidays. Option number 2 is to meet once a month for 4 hours from noon to 4 p.m. on the 2nd Thursday of each month for another day. We have also provided a tentative schedule for our town hall meetings, which are subject to change. Additional town halls may be added as well. And we're going to take public comments on this issue first, then discuss as a commission. Wendy, will you proceed with public comments?
Yes, and I would like to make a plea to the many of you that are in the audience to raise your hand to give public comment on this topic. I really want to know what you think, and I think the commissioners do too, about whether you would prefer that we have 2 meetings a month sort of at lunchtime or 1 longer meeting a month. I don't see anyone with your hands raised, but I'd love to hear from our county attendees, people who work for probation and for other departments, from people in the community, from advocacy groups, from folks from nonprofits, whether you find it easier to do an in-person meeting once a month or twice a month for a shorter amount of time. Thank you, Aditi, for raising your hand. We'll start with Aditi Sherikar. And once we get you unmuted, you can start. If you're on the phone, you can talk by dialing *3. Okay, you're good to go, Aditi.
Sherikar, she, her with Children's Defense Fund, California. I think 4 hours is a really long time to ask anybody to sit through a meeting, including all of you. So my recommendation would be to stick to the twice a month 2-hour meetings to maximize your engagement, particularly with those in the community who may not have 4 hours to set aside during the workday. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for heeding my call. That's exactly the kind of commentary we're looking for. I see someone who's listed with employee number 624. We're going to unmute you. In a second. Okay, you're good. Can you say something again?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, Greg Johnson, Department of Arts and Culture. I'm just weighing in to be in favor of virtual meetings for the purpose of expanding the number of folk who can be in attendance. I think a in-person meeting 1 time a month would be possible, but it's in my schedule, at least working as a county employee, it's very, very difficult to make more time available than that. So that's my request. Since you asked, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I actually am going to address that directly, and maybe I'll do it now, Chair Carrillo, and see if anyone else will raise their hand, if that's okay.
Great idea.
Okay, we've got one more. Let's go to Kelsey White, and then I'll come back to address Greg's question. Kelsey, you're unmuted.
For the Education Justice Coalition, I just wanted to note that I think, at least for me, I would prefer 2 meetings of 2 hours each. 4 hours is a little tricky to hold on a calendar and to be able to attend for the entire time. And also, I think it would be difficult for folks in the community to be able to reserve that time as well. So I echo the first comment that was made, and would also support continued virtual options for participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. So in addressing Greg's question, I want to try to be as upfront as possible about this. So first of all, I think you have a lot of people who agree with you about the access and engagement on virtual meetings, but unfortunately, the Brown Act does not allow for us to have virtual meetings. And once the governor's emergency order expires, we have to go back to having in-person meetings, which would mean that the commissioners all have to be in person at a posted location. They could potentially be at another location as long as it is also a posted location available for public comment. So for example, if we're holding our meeting at a library in Long Beach, we could have a commissioner who would be at a library in Palmdale that was open for public comment. That is a possibility, but that's pretty difficult to organize logistically. However, participants and even panelists can participate virtually in those meetings in what some people are calling a hybrid fashion. That is definitely what we're working on, is developing a way so that you all who can't get to the meeting in person can continue to at least listen in and see. I will tell you quite honestly, it's not the same. It's not the same as this in terms of hybrid meetings. I've watched quite a few meetings. The BSCC is a very good example where you have an in-person meeting and I can hear what's going on, but sometimes it's hard to hear which commissioner is speaking. So it won't be the same level of participation virtually when we're all in person. The other problem is, for example, I think the Board of Supervisors is doing a really exceptional job of these hybrid meetings, although they have a production team that's making this happen, which we do not. So we will definitely continue to have the meetings be live on WebEx, but I don't think that the experience will be quite the same as we move forward. So I don't see any other public comment. Chair Carrillo, if you want to take this back to the commissioners now.
Thank you, Wendy. Commissioners, any thoughts, comments? Looking over at the raised hands. I guess I'll start. I like the 2 hour versus the 4. And I guess it's going to depend too, as someone was saying, about just where these locations are going to be. But I assume they'll be pretty central, and there's options here about what you were describing, Wendy. But I would go with, was that option number 1? Vice Chair Jackson, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of does depend on where it is. Wendy, would it more than likely be at the Hall of Administration and be the same place every time?
No, not necessarily. So in fact, the COC very rarely, if ever, holds their meetings at the Hall of Administration. So we have a lot of options, and we also don't have to hold them in a singular place. We could hold them around the county. It just has to be in a place, obviously, that is conducive to the meetings and parking and things like that. But there definitely are other county buildings that are options, including 510 South Vermont, which is a location that we've looked at and where there's great parking and a beautiful meeting room, as well as nonprofit community-based organizations that have rooms that work very well for this kind of meeting. So we have lots of options. That's kind of what I was saying about the secretary's duties in setting out some ideas about where to meet.
I'll come back on where I am on that. I'm very unsure, so.
Commissioner Kakani, you're up.
If we could get a list of those other locations, it would be wildly helpful. And if they do, span through the 5 districts, I think that would certainly make it accessible for a broader audience to be able to meet in person. I can just speak from like the coalition perspective. It is unlikely that anyone would be able to attend for 4 hours. You know, there are a few of us who like this is our job all day, every day. But for many of the folks who are part, at least of the Los Angeles Youth Uprising Coalition, they've got other full-time jobs. And so like being able to peel away for an hour, you know, during the lunch hour, or being able to, you know, set aside 2 hours once every 2 weeks is certainly an easier ask than 4 hours once a week or once a month, excuse me.
Anyone else?
I'll just say, as far as a list, we don't have a lot of restrictions on what that list is, Commissioner Kagani. It could be anywhere that you all think is appropriate. We have something of a budget to pay for space in those facilities. So some of the things the Civilian Oversight Commission has run into is parking and space and things like that in some of the facilities that they've used. They've had a lot of luck at St. Anne's, which has a beautiful conference room, and a couple of other community-based organizations that have nice big rooms that can seat 50 to 100 people. But there's lots of flexibility about where it is as long as it's posted in advance.
Wendy, I will say that although I won't be chair at the time, I would suggest and would be excited. I like to drive, so that we would definitely, as Millie hinted, Palmdale, Lancaster, you know, wherever the county. It's a very big. I know Sean is excited about that. It's a very big county, and I think that
Showing on my face, huh?
you can't hide that. I think people deserve, especially in-person meetings, people deserve. As we know, there's a lot of youth who are incarcerated who come from the Antelope Valley, and a lot of parents who I think the feel of having in person and hearing people's frustrations or congratulations, whatever it may be, will be it's overdue. So I think it would be great to host these in places that maybe other folks have refused to go to.
Thank you. Actually, Jennifer, or whoever's running the screen, can you put the document back up? Because one of the things that we put on here is the town halls. Those are very different because we can hold those in person or virtual as long as we have less than a quorum of commissioners there. So those actually have a lot more flexibility as far as location, time, everywhere we go. So there are options to be able to go out to other places. The other thing that I wanted to say is just to remind commissioners that probation headquarters is in Downey. So the access to, I mean, Chief Patino has been incredible with his willingness to be at every meeting we have at all hours of the day. But we have also had the benefit of having lots of other managers, supervisors, people who come in to talk to our commission. And the closer we are to the facilities where they work might encourage more of that participation as well. So I think there are a lot of aspects to be considered in terms of selecting locations and moving around.
Commissioner Garcia-Lays, your hands up.
Yeah, since I guess where and when do kind of overlap. I hear everybody saying that twice a month is better for the meetings, and I want to honor that. But twice a month and moving them all over the county. I mean, at that point, we're really talking about you're asking me to spend 6 hours a month in the car, which is more time than or as much time as I would actually be spending at the meetings, I think. So I don't know if that's a good use of all of the commissioners' time. So I do want to do the twice a month if that's what people say. But I do think that to some degree weighs against moving all around the county or even for every meeting.
Even we can hold something that's near public transportation. I know that, you know, driving is a thing for all of us. I definitely like my cars, but you know, that's an option. Okay, we're going to move on and take a vote. So we have, Wendy, at this point now, are we, what are we, have we oh, Vice Chair Jackson,
We're voting right now? So
that's what we're doing.
okay, so I just have a couple comments before we do that, because I am feeling like there's quite a bit of overlap, because where is important, when is obviously important, and knowing that I am being nominated to be chair, it means that I'm going to have to make a commitment to something that I am not sure of right now, especially with, you know, top of the year responsibilities for my actual job. I don't want to lock into something and then just have perpetual conflict. You know what I mean? Just because it's like it's going to be on this side of town, on that side of town. So I'm a little bit wary of making the commitment right now in December, not knowing what January 2023 holds. And so, I mean, I am in favor of the two the 2 meetings per month. Also realizing that sometimes those meetings do span 3.5 hours. Sometimes they're not always 2 hours. They're a lot longer, especially with public comment. And so, again, it's very difficult to facilitate a 4-hour meeting. So I'm definitely in favor of breaking that up, but I would need some level of stability around the location. You know what I mean? To know that if we're going to be expected to go somewhere twice a month, knowing where that is and allowing myself to plan around that would be slightly different. And that's coming from the perspective of someone who might be chair. It's important. So I might have to abstain my vote.
Wendy, wasn't there a location off Vermont? Did you mention that?
Yes,
That's
so
a
I was
probation?
actually, yes, 510 South Vermont, which is the new Department of Mental Health building. It's an absolutely beautiful building with a terrace level meeting room that's open. It's gorgeous. That is definitely a possibility. Another thing we were talking about, Chair Jackson, that might be helpful for you in particular is having one of the 2 meetings a month be static in downtown. Somewhere in downtown, either at the Hall of Administration or somewhere close to downtown, and then move the other meeting around so that we might have, so that there would be more consistency in terms of that. The other possibility, of course, and maybe Alex can weigh in on this, is that you can schedule 2 meetings a month and decide that one of those meetings, instead of being you could cancel it and hold a town hall instead of a meeting where you have less than quorum of commissioners, and you can hold it at the same time or a different time, but just not take any action during that time. Is that fair, Alex?
Yes, Wendy, once you set up a schedule, you know, if needed, the commission can, of course, cancel meetings and then schedule more town halls if that's what the commission wants to do.
I just have to say that, you know, since I'm still the chair, I think that, and Vice Chair, I respect your concern, but there's 9 of us. There's other commissioners come from other parts of the county who want to be there and need to be there as well. And I know if we're just talking about downtown LA being the place that we're all going to gather, if that's just going to be somewhere near downtown, you know, it can be a thing for some folks to come out from Southeast, or I might be in Antelope Valley that week or whatever. So I think that yeah, obviously there needs to be someone there to facilitate, but I think even if once we get there, we're kind of locked in because it's the heart of traffic when we leave. So I think that it's sort of part of the it's just sort of part of the job, I guess, to not get too caught up with like, will I be there or not? I think that's going to apply for all of us. So with that, unless someone else has some comments or other concerns, we have to take a vote on this. So can I have a motion to select the POC's regular meeting schedule for 2023? Well, actually, we have to first decide what to vote on. So I motion that we stay with option number 1, which is twice a month.
I second the motion.
Thank you, Sean. Any discussion on this? Wendy?
I actually assumed she would have said something, but Commissioner Kokani, the Thursday schedule is something that worked for the original commissioners. Does that work for your schedule?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no discussion, Wendy, can we get a roll?
Yes, thank you. So we are voting on continuing the twice a month, second and fourth Thursday meetings, and we will select locations taking into consideration both community participation and travel time going forward. We're going to vote yes or no on that. Commissioner Canales,
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia-Lez,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
I'm going to abstain my vote.
Commissioner. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kokani.
Aye.
Just looking to see if Don has joined us yet, but I think not. Commissioner Carrillo, Chair Carrillo?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes with four, is that right, Alex? With 4 yeses and an abstention, or we have to have 5 yes votes for it to pass?
It's the majority of those present, so it
Great,
does
thank
pass.
you. Okay. Okay, back to you, Chair
Okay,
Carrillo.
thank you. Moving on now to item number 5. We will discuss and take appropriate action on a report from the Los Angeles County Office of Inspector General on the movement of youth from Central Juvenile Hall. Here to report on the item is the Inspector General, Max Huntsman. Max, the floor is yours.
Hi, I just have a verbal report. We have been, Eric Bates, the Assistant Inspector General for Probation, his team has been working on a report regarding the incident that occurred back in March involving moving youth out of the Central Juvenile Hall to Barry J. Nordoff. That report is essentially complete, but is in the fact-checking process. They did a number of fact-gathering procedures, interview of Assistant Chief or Deputy Chief Fletcher, speaking to probation staff, youth, also reviewing statistics on force in the months after that incident, and most importantly, looking at emails. I've been asked to come today and talk to you a little bit about, give you a kind of a preview of it because of a Times article recently. This body had a meeting in April, after the March move, in which there were hard questions given to the probation leadership from the commissioners, appropriately so, regarding the representations that were made suggesting that the move was somehow an emergency, that it was a surprise for them that they needed to move youth. The language was used to describe a directive from the state, and that's talked in the Times article, mentioned in the Times article recently. I don't want to characterize the statements that were made because you were all here and there's a record of what was said, but our review found absolutely no evidence whatsoever that this was anything other than a choice by the probation department management. They were given a large amount of advance notice about when the inspections would be. And on March 9th, the chief probation officer sent a communication to the board saying that there would be a closing of Central Juvenile Hall temporarily, and that Barry J. would be the subject of an inspection. The next day, the probation department sent a letter to the state saying that there would be a closure. And the day after that, the state sent back a letter saying, essentially, that's fine and all well and good, but we're still going to be inspecting on the 14th, the upcoming inspection date, if there are people there. And that appears to be when the probation department decided to move youth immediately, resulting in, as you all know, a situation which was dangerous for staff and youth as a result of this immediate action, rather than a planned action which could have been planned over weeks. We saw no evidence that was in any way, as has sometimes been described, a surprise to the probation department or an external event that was beyond their control. It was completely a choice made, apparently, to avoid the negative publicity and response of having this inspection that was about to happen. Also, in addition, we've looked at some of the statistics. There wasn't a vast uptick in the months later in terms of force and assaults. However, there was an uptick, and there was certainly a change for the status of many youth who had been in a facility by themselves and suddenly were all aggregated. And so as a result, the violence that occurred would then be in a single place. So there'd be a larger amount of violence, maybe proportionate based on the population, but still a change for the level of safety for youth and staff. So in my opinion, it was a not best practices. It was a bad thing to do. And also, most importantly, the messaging was inappropriate. And I really appreciate the action this body took in April to call the department on that messaging. That's all I have to say, unless anybody has any questions about it.
Thank you, Max. I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions, but for now, let's just get public comments out the way. Wendy, can you take care of that for us?
Thank you. If you'd like to make public comments on this issue, please click on the little hand function or send a message to the host. And if you're on the phone, dial *6. And we'll start actually with a call-in user, which is call-in user number 6. Your number starts with 661 and you're unmuted. You can begin speaking. Can we hear you?
Hi. Hello.
Yes.
Hi. I think I may have raised my hand a little prematurely, but I'm wondering if I can ask your indulgence. I see, looking at the agenda, that I probably was going to comment on agenda number 6. I may have to leave this call at any moment, and I'm wondering if you would indulge me to let me make a comment on that item.
Chair Carrillo, I think that's your decision.
Proceed, please.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. This is Councilwoman Marsha McLean, and I was looking at the report that was made on this item, and I was looking at the cons regarding Camp Scudder with significant community opposition, open dorms that would require significant and costly upgrades, 4 to 5 years for readiness, and opens a closed facility and expanding the footprint. You know, I've made these comments before, and because of these cons for Camp Scudder, I think it's really time to get it that Camp Scott is not feasible and to simply take it off the books. It would save you a lot of time. It would save our community a lot of time, and obviously our city. And I just wanted to mention, I was just reelected for 4 years, and so I'm not going anywhere, and you're going to continue to hear from me. So with all due respect, once again, I would urge you to simply take Camp Scott and Scudder off your books because it is not feasible. And thank you for allowing me to speak right now, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to make public comment about the OIG's report? I don't see anyone, and I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Carrillo.
Thank you, Wendy. And before I proceed, and just to the call, the woman who just called in, the city council person, we're not planning on going anywhere else either. And this is not about Santa Clarita or the neighboring cities. This is a county issue, and our main focus is housing these youth. So I know there's been an endless conversation about location, and there's obviously other perspectives. So moving on from that, commissioners, this is a great topic here. Any comments, questions, please raise your hands. Commissioner Garcia-Lez.
Hi, so I'm really looking forward to the report. I expect to have more questions afterwards, but the one thing you said that caught my attention was the documentation of incidents of violence in the facilities after the transfer. That really piques my interest, and I'm looking forward to seeing those numbers. And I hope they are able to discuss the severity of the incidents and not just the number of incidents. Because what we have heard from staff is that well, I think we've heard that the number went up, but also that there were much more serious and large scale involving more youth at a time incidents. So I don't know if it's almost done. I don't want to add a bunch of things to the to-do list, but I am really curious to look at that and to see how that data is disaggregated to give a clearer sense of what actually went on and to see whether or not it verifies or not the anecdotal things we've heard from staff and youth.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kakani, you're up.
Thank you. I had, I think, raised public comment about this issue, and I'm not sure if it was addressed or shared, but given the increase in violence that you named, I'm just curious if there's also any documentation connected to the number of like new petitions or kind of, like criminal consequences essentially that arose from this move and choice of closure.
I'll answer those two question comments. The review is a statistical one regarding increases in force, assaults on staff, assaults youth versus youth, a variety of different sorts of statistics during the time periods afterwards. It is not a disaggregation of individual cases. It is not an examination of allegations of specific incidents that occurred at the time of the move or subsequent to that. As I think you all are aware, we've been given half the staff that we asked for to conduct probation oversight. We're not conducting any independent investigations of the incidents themselves. I think that would be difficult to do anyway, but I do think it's appropriate for the probation department to report to you on the incidents. But this report isn't that thing, so I think you'll be disappointed with respect to that aspect of it.
Commissioners,
I just
anyone?
want to add, nor does it contain any issues related to criminal petitions, as Commissioner Kakani was wondering.
Yes, Wendy.
I just want to make sure that I understand correctly what Commissioner Garcia Ley is asking for, because it's interesting and not something I'd really thought about before. You're talking about, I think you're talking about like this particular investigation and the severity of individual events, but it's interesting to think about how the department reports on youth violence and youth on staff violence in general, and addressing at some level the level of severity. I will say the department has given us quite a bit of information about that over the last few months, and there are some indications around, for example, whether there was an injury or whether the youth was transported, that gives some sense about severity. But what are the types of things you're talking about that we might look for in terms of learning more about the individual incidents?
That was a question to me. I don't have a list. Well, first, referring to Inspector General Huntsman's comments, I'm sure I will not be disappointed by the report. I do expect there will have to be more done in follow-up, so I don't expect it to end everything. Perhaps it will, raise questions as much as it answers, but that's what a good report does. As far as the kinds of things I was thinking, you were characterizing it correctly. So some involve the number of youth involved in the incident at the same time. Are we talking about 15 individual incidents that happened in a week or a month? Or are we talking about one incident with 15 youth involved? Injuries, level of injuries certainly matter. I feel like we're a little bit off topic here, but what I also want to know is how many of these incidents involve this repeated incidents by the same youth or the same staff members. So yeah, this is all information that I think would help the public and us understand what's happening when we talk about violence. You know, all violence is not equally harmful. But yeah, I feel like there's so much data we need. But I would put that maybe towards the top.
Thank you.
And I would just add that you know, the commissioner's points are all correct. If you want to control violence, you need to do a very careful qualitative analysis of what's happening, and that's what he's talking about. The probation department's internal affairs and statistical record keeping ought to be tracking this sort of conduct. They ought to be crunching numbers like this and doing reviews like this on a regular basis in order to minimize uses of force, to make the uses of force appropriate. I mean, our whole pepper spray problem is connected to the same issue: is when is something a tool to prevent injury, and when is it being misused not to cause injury or trauma. So these are the kinds of analysis that I would hope the probation department would be doing. Yeah, I think the main purpose of our report is to talk about what happened in this incident, and in terms of the decision making at the top levels, which, as I say, my conclusion is it was inappropriate. But I do agree that there needs to be a more detailed analysis, not just numbers. If you just use statistical numbers of overall data, you're going to find out if there's a problem, but you're not going to find out how to fix it. And how to fix it, the devil's in the details. So I think that's all correct. But as I say, at the moment, we don't have sufficient staff to do a meaningful analysis. Not saying we haven't done some analysis, but it's just not going to be effective. And the probation department currently does not appear to be tooled to answer those questions.
Funny.
Sorry to belabor this point, and I'm not really sure who to direct this to or how to direct it. I don't know if it's, but I would ask that the probation department, then, if not the Office of the Inspector General, provide at least that information during the period or when Central Juvenile Hall was closed and those young people were at Barry J. Nydorf. How many petitions were filed based on acts of violence within Barry J. Nydorf, and if it can be specified as to like which units those petitions arose out of, that would be helpful.
Sean?
Yeah, so welcome, Commissioner Kakani. I have a request for you then, which is that after the report comes out, if you would put together a motion of exactly what that is, and then share it consistent with the Brown Act for some advice before the meeting following the publication of the report. I would love to work with you on that.
Okay, seeing no further discussion. Max, thank you so much for your time. Eric, I know you're there. There you are. Really appreciate your work. And it was nice seeing you, Max, at the Hilda Solis's swearing-in ceremony. And I guess I'll say this is that, you know, I know our last meeting there was you know, I was saddened by the fact that there will be less interaction with your office, Max, but I'm grateful that there are things that are pending and things that are being worked out and figured out, and reports are coming our way. So really appreciate that. And you know, this issue here there was a lot of exaggeration in that obviously stemmed from this, and to know, you know, what your teaser, and then looking forward to hearing the full report. It's something that I really hope that we can use, not as only as a POC, but speaking for probation to use, because I'm sure these things will continue to happen on some degree or another. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know we got a situation here. 1 second. Wendy, I know we're taking a break here, and it's 2 o'clock here.
I think we should go forward with the next agenda item. Can I just say, I will make sure to work with Max and his team to see at which of the upcoming meetings we can agendize this for the sharing of the full report, which the OIG does a great job of sharing. And if you're not on their mailing list, you should be. But also work with Commissioners Kakani and Garcia Lays to get language for a motion and see if there's anything we can work on with the department in the meantime. So, but I think we should go on to the next agenda item before we take our break, unless you all disagree.
I'm ready to move forward. So let's, I know Adam looks like he's ready as well. So moving on to item number 6, we will discuss and take appropriate action on progress the Los Angeles County Probation Department has made moving youth disposition to the secure track to Campus Kilpatrick and future plans for additional SYTF sites. Deputy Chief Bettino, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Carrillo, and thanks as always for having me. Welcome, Commissioner Kakani. So just quickly want to share a brief update and then obviously be available to answer any questions that you may have. So we did have a meeting of our Juvenile Justice Realignment Block Grant subcommittee, so the JJRBG, yesterday. So we did get a meeting in and shared some updates there. A couple of things that we did accomplish. We had kind of a deeper conversation about facilities. Prior to that, we discussed a spending plan. So we do receive funding from the state as part of a realignment of these services to counties. And so we are trying our very best to come together with the spending plan that's comprehensive, that really highlights all of the services and supports that we're working towards for this population. Some of the things that are in play now, some of the things that we want to grow into. For example, we understand, or we know that credible messengers are getting started. We have a person at DYD who's been hired to kind of lead that effort now. So he's been a part of what's happening at Barry J and at Campus Kilpatrick, but we want to expand that program. So that's something that the JJRBG has circled and is excited to continue to fund. And there's a concerted effort to get some kind of framing around what are we spending and how. So the way that we've done this is we've taken a look at the DJJ transition plan. We categorized based on what we've included in our plan, the goals that are included in the plan around positive youth development, education, vocational training, for example, family engagement, behavioral mental health services. And we've sort of categorized each of those areas and then tried to assign some dollar amounts. The dollar amounts are fluid. They're based on current population and how the population will grow. We also have some dedicated lines to reentry services. More important than that, though, is housing options. So community-based housing options as we continue to pilot some alternatives to SYTF, frankly, some community-based options. Then we will we'll pilot and we'll continue to grow as we get a better sense of who's going to be eligible. We'll make recommendations to the court, and the court will decide who can be a part of those community-based options. So we're still trying to build all of that. But there is a framework that we were able to get approved yesterday for how the funding will go. And essentially, as you are all very aware, it's difficult to get things done in these public meetings. So we have some work groups developed kind of offline where a lot of those decisions will be vetted and then brought to the larger committee. And that will be publicly shared in the next couple of weeks. It's really something we need to share with CEO. And so happy to share kind of a finalized document once we fill in some more blanks. We can show folks some of the spending proposals. The other thing that we discussed yesterday, in large part, was facilities, and I'll say, I think all of us are frustrated, to say the least, about where we are on the facility conversation. We know that, so the JGRBG has made a lot of recommendations to the board. This body has made recommendations as well. Really, I think where we find ourselves is that the JGRBG is seeking to take this on a little bit more and really work towards a recommendation that that highlights, I'll say, what is actually going to work and what may not. So what we've talked through is interim solutions and long-term solutions. And when I say that, so the caller that called in earlier, Ms. McLean, when we've made our recommendation around Camp Scott, part of the struggle there is really not even the cost, but the amount of time it's going to take to get that facility up and running. We have beds available at Barry J. Nydorf. We have 48 beds that we're trying to grow into at Campus Kilpatrick. But given the entire universe of what may need a secure youth treatment facility, we don't have enough beds. And so rather than forcing everybody into a Barry J situation or a Campus Kilpatrick, we're trying to find as many solutions as we possibly can, which would include potentially another facility, another 2 facilities. And so what the JGRBG is going to be doing over the next couple of weeks as quickly as possible is really going through other available facilities and determining if it's even really a viable option. We've done some of this, but we've understood too that we're operating under some assumptions. We're assuming certain things about the surrounding communities. For example, we can say based on experience that there may be some disagreement from folks in communities, but we don't know that for sure until we kind of explore it a little bit more in detail. Cost, and what is it actually going to take to get something renovated? We know that BSCC has to weigh in because these facilities have to be Title 24 compliant. So what is that going to entail and what is that going to cost? So the other facilities that have been effectively put on the table for a longer term discussion solution are Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, Dorothy Kirby Center, Central Juvenile Hall, Barry J. Nydorf. And so taking a very deep dive and understanding what is actually possible. Some of the concerns I'll share that have been raised from the JJRBG is that we've been at this for 2 years, and some of these young men have been at Barry J. Nydorf for most of that time, for example. And so what can be done as quickly as possible to move away from that reality? So, and one of the things that we're doing as it's an intermediate step is we're renovating 2 of the units outside of the compound. So RS and TV are being renovated so that SYTF youth can move into those spaces. We have 11 youth at Campus Kilpatrick now. We believe that we'll grow up to 48 by the summer. So there's still some Title 24 issues that we're seeking to resolve there, some fencing work and things like that. We also have the staffing issue where we're trying to get labor back to the table to start to have some of those conversations with us. But decisions will need to be made about how and when to quickly move over there. The Title 24 really is the big hangup. We believe that we can resolve some of the staffing issues internally just by making some tough decisions. So there's all of that is still at play. We're trying to make the best possible scenario exist at Barry J. Nydorf. There is a realization, though, that given the current population, given the work and the recommendations that we've made to the board and to others with no definitive discretionary action on these facilities has really it's really hindered us a little bit. The other issue that I just want to raise, and folks probably are already aware of this, we had talked about a June date for DJJ youth to start to come home, or a little bit prior to that. The bench has really accelerated that, and we're going to start to see young people in February. So that really was part of the reason we wanted to convene and start to talk through what is the interim solution, because it's 2 months away at this point. And so we're going to have young men and women coming back in February. Again, I know there's a lot of frustration around this. We're trying to figure out how quickly we can come to some decisions and really lay out the options for folks, so that when we're making a recommendation, it's not based on preference. It's not even based on preference of probation or JGRB or JGRBG or surrounding community. It really is the best option because we've done the hard work of looking into these spaces to determine what it's going to take. And I think when we talk about renovation, when we talk about really transforming some of these spaces, we know that takes time. It takes time, it takes capital investment, it takes investment, frankly, that this county has not wanted to make in these facilities for quite some time, with the exception of Campus Kilpatrick. But we're also trying to really grapple with not expanding our footprint. How do we do this so that we're not having to reopen a closed facility or several closed facilities? If we do reopen those facilities, what does that mean? Is it short term while we figure out the other thing? Is it reopening it to transform it into vocational training center, work furlough, something that can be more of I suppose, a step down option? So all of these things are being considered. Probation is having these conversations with a couple of representatives from the board, as well as a couple of representatives from the JGRBG. So we're trying to have as much of a collaborative discussion about this as we possibly can. But it really is something that very clearly, as I've shared and as you are all aware, it's coming to a head sooner than later. And again, we're frustrated based on all the work that has been done, because there has been a lot of work done, and it still feels like for lack of a better way to put it, I think we feel stuck with Barry J and Kilpatrick as options, knowing that those are maybe not. Kilpatrick, I think we agree, is a great option. Barry J needs some work, and would need to be vetted a little bit more thoroughly to be considered a longer term option. I will stop. Please let me know if there are questions, and as always, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Adam. Wendy, do we have any public comments on this item?
We do. And as we move to public comment, I want to say that Adam prepared and presented a PowerPoint at the JGRBG meeting yesterday, which is attached to our agenda, which is very helpful to explain what he just explained. So if you looked at the agenda, we didn't attach it until this morning, but it's there, and maybe Janae can put the link in the chat. We have two pre-registered comments. One was the commenter who commented on the last item, and next is Mayor West. So Mayor Lorraine West, we will unmute you and can begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Lorraine West, and I'm the mayor of the city of Santa Clarita. The city of Santa Clarita has engaged with the JJRBG subcommittee and the board of supervisors on the unsuitability of Camp Scott for over a year and a half now. The city remains steadfast that Camp Scott's dilapidated conditions lack the necessary amenities and capacity to incorporate the programming, safety, and treatment prescribed by the LA model and the Youth Justice Reimagined report. The over 70-year facility, located in a high fire area and flood path, have been closed now for nearly 3 years, and any future potential use of Camp Scott will contradict the county's mission to reduce the juvenile incarceration footprint. I am pleased to hear that the JJRBG is considering and analyzing other facilities to be used as a secure youth treatment facility, as there are many open youth facilities that offer the feasibility and immediate resources to responsibly take in former DJJ individuals. As such, I urge this commission to work with the JJRBG subcommittee in identifying suitable and feasible sites as an alternative to Camp Scott, and that will offer the immediate resources and services needed for those on a secured track. Thank you for your time and the consideration of my comments.
Thank you. Next up, we'll go to the participant listed as Green Thumb AV Youth. The Antelope Valley in the house. We're going to unmute you and give you 2 minutes. It still looks muted on. There we go. Can we hear you now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Ms. Cran. I'm the program director for Green Thumb AV Youth Program. Making a comment on everything that I've been listening to and bringing it to the current agenda item. There's a lot that needs to be done with our youth culturally. And listening to the assaults that are being posed against the staffing, developing more of a culture of enrichment as well as accountability for those actions of violations and violence, and providing education of what is wrong and what is a violation, as well as what is accountability for what I would consider additional punishment, in providing our services as a youth program, as well as being a gang reduction intervention program. We have proven that some of the inmates, even in the state facilities, they may enter that environment of a gang because that is the gang mentality, not because they are gang members, but because it is a environment with that gang mentality. We still provide a gang reduction program to implement the information that they may not know. A lot of our LGBT, our first time offenders in any facility, is threatened, bullied, and etc. to engage into their environment in order to even get to what we would call release. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you'll keep engaging with us in our meeting. Next, we have Ms. Coffey. Ms. Coffey, we're going to unmute you. And you can begin.
Deputy Probation Officer with the LA County Probation. And I've been with probation for 25 years. And when I first entered probation, I worked at Challenger Memorial Youth Center. It was a fairly new facility at that time, and we had 6 different camps at that facility. So this is more of a suggestion. I just don't understand why Challenger is not being sought out as the facility for the secure youth. It has definitely the space there. I know from my understanding, it was Captain Barger repurposed it for, I think, a vocational training, but there seemed to be more need right now for these youths, for the secure track youths. And so I'm asking that be looked into again. I mean, it's a new facility. We've wasted a lot of taxpayers' money to open it up for youths, and now we just basically threw it away and have something else going on there when it can be used for these youths. And I don't believe Barry J is the appropriate place for those youths. I think they should be in a camp setting. It'll give them more incentive to want to do well and to get out of the predicament that they are in. So I would ask again that Challenger Memorial Youth Center be looked at as an option. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for joining. Chair Carrillo, I don't see any other hands raised. And we did not receive any written comment on this item. Is that correct, Janae?
Yes, Wendy, that's correct.
So we'll go back to you now.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, let's open the floor for commissioners' comments or questions. If you have a comment, question, please raise your hand. Adam, I know there was a meeting yesterday when Wendy alluded to a PowerPoint. Was there anything that, you gave a verbal report, was there anything that stands out from that PowerPoint you might want to share?
It's mostly what I have shared. I think, I think there's enough of a consensus at this point amongst the members of the JJRBG that something needs to happen and something needs to be pushed. And the feeling is that if we can raise a really solid recommendation, then that would be the recommendation to move forward. So we're trying to find a kind of a different way to push to see if we can get something ultimately decided upon. The only other thing that I'll share is that there is consideration with our attorneys about CEQA and about environmental impact at all of these places. And so there's some hesitancy to declare sites based on based on what it may trigger from that standpoint. But we're in lockstep with county council, and like I said, we've been communicating with board offices. I'm really hopeful we may be able to see some resolution here shortly.
One last question. Maybe you said it, and I just need some clarification. But are you saying you want to get labor back at the conversation table, or maybe at the table you said? So is it labor who's holding us up at this point?
So we've sort of been on a little break in our conversations with labor, and we're engaging with CEO employee relations to figure out what happens next. So as I've shared, their contract is still open and it has not been signed. We were seeking to take the SYTF conversation separate from the larger contract. So trying to figure out, how do we get staffing resolved? How do we get some of how do we allay some of their concerns around the location and things like that? That didn't happen as well as we had hoped. So basically those things kept kind of merging together. We've had now a conversation with Fizia Davenport, in fact, and one of our labor organizations to start to rekindle things. So we're still waiting for a little bit of a signal from employee relations and CEO's office to see what happens next. What I want to be clear about, though, is that we need to make some difficult decisions, whether or not and when we can get back to the table. There's management action that could be taken. We're trying to make sure that we are understanding all of the risks really with pushing forward with something. We'd really like to get back to the table with labor and continue the conversation.
Thank you, Adam. Commissioner Kakani, you're up.
Thank you. So I kind of have two separate sets of questions, but the first is really focused on like programming and the spending plan, right? Because it seems like as you said, the facilities conversation feels a little stuck. But the fact remains that there are 60 plus young folks who have secure track dispos and who are deserving of programming that is both supportive and healing. And so I'm looking at this spreadsheet that you had shared yesterday at the JJRBG, and I'm just curious kind of how you arrived at like prioritizing these buckets. Like I'm not seeing any dollars dedicated to, for example, mentoring, coaching, and transitional planning for any of the 3 years. And there's only 1 year of funding dedicated to the arts and cultural learning process. And $600,000 every single year dedicated to probation and external trainers. So just trying to get some understanding on how you all arrived at this and why, and like what your guiding principles or values were kind of when prioritizing the buckets that you did.
So the buckets are a little bit more important for now than the dollar amounts, because the dollar amounts are sort of speculative at this point. We're trying to figure out and round those out. But the buckets come from our DJJ transition plan. So the plan that we submitted to the state identifies those areas as the key areas that we want to be providing services and supports for our young people. So that's the idea behind the buckets. As we fill those things out, what you see in the first column, that is, again, this is still a working document, and we went through a lot of time yesterday kind of explaining this is flexible, it's fluid. We're working through to figure out exactly what the dollars will be. The first column's a little bit confusing because some of those services were in place. So the arts and culture, that dollar amount specifically, because you raised it, that one we know that we were funding it with some other funding streams prior to. And so some of it is, here's the service that was at Barry J, here's the service that was at Campus Kilpatrick. We're going to continue to provide that service to young people. It was just being utilized. We're spending a different bucket for those services. We need to be a little bit more clear and deliberate about, we're going to use this 823 money now to provide these services for this population. So that's something that needs to be massaged internally. But I mean, you raise a point that we've been seeking to address here all along. You saw at the board on Tuesday 2 separate dog training programs that went before the board. So Marley's Mutts at Campus Kilpatrick and Pause for Life at Barry J. That's one mechanism that we have at our disposal to try to get dollars out faster, is through some board action. So we're seeking to do some of that. We're also seeking to potentially use CEO's delegated authority, because if we go through, again, the RFP process and all of that, and there's some things that are underway. So the sex offender treatment, for example, there's a scope of work we're working to get a bid out so that we can get some folks in to provide those services. We're trying to figure out ways around the very cumbersome county contracting process, because ultimately what you see is it's been sort of a something that we've cobbled together over time. And one of the conversations that we had yesterday, or part of the conversation that was raised, is what is going to be the overarching kind of positive youth development framework for this population. There's a commitment while we're having the conversations about these facilities to try to weave that in, because one of the things that the community members have raised repeatedly is some of the programming and staffing discussions may be very specifically site specific. So you may have a site that is dedicated to specialized populations, for example. And so what's the service array there that makes sense? Part of the other conversation that we're having is around reentry. So there's not a reentry line item. You don't see a reentry bucket, but it's embedded and infused in each of those buckets, because the rationale is that this is a continuum of services and care. So whether the kid is in a secure youth treatment facility or out in the community in transitional housing or something like that, the service array should be somewhat similar. And then what the framework doesn't get into is some of the granular detail that you all will like to see, which will be the next iteration of this document, which is, this is how much money actually went to each of these things, and this is what it's for. We're still working through that. So we'll have to have some more conversation with CEO. What it is, it's a framework, it's not a budget. So a budget is going to tell us, here's how we're spending. For example, we don't have a dollar amount yet for DMH clinicians. That's going to be part of what you see in here, is what are the clinicians providing. And then in there, you'll see these are the services that the clinicians are providing. And then you touched on this on the training. I just want to make sure, because I had the same question that you had. Why do we have a separate line item for training? Some of it's because we're going to bring in a DBT provider to do specialized training for our staff. So that's dialectical behavioral treatment. So that for that population, it's a separate line item, because we would bring in a vendor to do that training. That doesn't include the training that would be provided by probation staff or mental health staff or LACA.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered all your questions, but it's a document that purposefully is going to be revised and fine-tuned over time. We will have a process by which folks can bring suggestions, programs to a smaller subcommittee, and then that be raised to the JJRBG for finalizing decisions about where the dollars go.
Okay, and then I'm seeing that like there's nothing in the college courses column for year one, and then there's 400,000 and 450,000 for year one and year two. And so taking, separating the budget part, I guess I know that there's been like significant conversation about Mission College kind of providing college courses, but expanding it so that other perhaps, community colleges can provide services. So all that to say, like, will you also provide not just like the dollar amount, but also to whom these dollars are going, right? Like for whom this contract exists with?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, is there going to be any sort of like evaluation mechanism? I don't know the extent to which that exists currently, but are you seeking to implement something of that nature where both young people, and whoever else can kind of evaluate the programming that you all are choosing to invest in?
So that has come up, and there is a placeholder sort of for that. There was some discussion, I think, originally amongst our team of bolstering our internal research, because we do have a research division that's very small, so we ask a lot of them. I think the consensus, though, as we move past that is really to bring in somebody third party, so to use some of the dollars to bring in a third party to start sooner than later, to start to kind of, what are the types of things that we want to be evaluating with this population and with the programming.
And in this last year and a half, has there been any evaluation? I mean, obviously, young people have had secure track disposed since July 1st of last year.
So there has not yet been
any evaluation. Okay, thank you for those questions. And then sorry if I could just ask the staffing question. How many staff are dedicated to young people with secure track dispositions right now, if any?
There are specific staff. So we have, I don't know the number off the top of my head. I apologize. I don't know the number at Campus Kilpatrick currently. So we do have a full, we have staff there for the 11. I am not clear how many staff are dedicated to Barry J. And then we have caseworkers as well. So there's case managers who are assigned to this population. We have one manager who has sort of taken on this population as well. So Mary Ann Smiley is the director over SYTF, but we have another manager at Barry J who's been assisting with the youth there. So that's something we would have to dig up and find.
Both number of case managers and.
Yeah, but the regular supervision is still at Barry J, at least, is still being conducted by our detention services staff.
And what training, if any, do they have or do they receive to kind of support young folks with secure track dispose?
So they are still, I mean, it's there hasn't been additional training provided to this population. We are continuing to develop that. And in fact, this week we discussed starting with some of the training that we'd identified previously. Part of the struggle there is because we haven't dedicated a group of staff. This goes back to the labor conversations. So because we haven't been able to dedicate a group of staff who's going to be doing this full time, we've been sort of delayed in our training, but we've decided that we're going to move forward with some training for those who are working with this population now.
Can you share when you have a moment to dig it up, like what how many staff are dedicated to these young people, or I don't know like how it's categorized, but like how many case managers are dedicated to the 60+ young people between the compound, RS, and Kilpatrick?
We can gather all of that. I will say, I know definitively when you talk about Barry J, there are some staff who have decided and sort of volunteer they want to work with this population, but given the staffing issues that we have had at our institutions that we're all well aware of, there's rotation and movement of those staff at times because we may be short-staffed in another unit. So we can certainly provide that information in terms of case managers, how many staff we have at Kilpatrick, and then at any given time, how many staff we would have dedicated to this population at Barry J. Yeah, we can circle back and get that information for you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Adam, well, Commissioner, before I ask Adam a question, any other questions, please raise your hands. Adam, I wanted to share with you and maybe just not only get a response, but also see what you're hearing from your end. But we're hearing a ton of frustration concerning the SYTF lack of policy. I know right now the frustration really stems from although there might be short staff, even the staff that are there currently, if it was 1, 2, whatever it is, really feel like they're operating blindly. And it not only raised concerns for me and everyone else in the room about potential liability from probation from within, that they're sending their employees into a situation with no guidelines, no policies, specifically the word policy. And so I was surprised to learn that there isn't one, unless there is one and you'd like to share.
So
and if so, yep, please.
Chair Carrillo, you cut out right as you were asking your final question. So you asked Chief, we heard you ask Chief Patino about whether there's a policy or not, and then you said one other thing that got cut off.
Thank you, guys. The final thing is only if there is something, I would love to hear it.
Sure. So admittedly, that is an area that we've circled and need to address. But so for Detention Services Bureau, we have a manual that governs practice in all of our juvenile halls. Same for Residential Treatment Services Bureau. So our camps and halls have manuals that are Title 15 compliant, that govern practice in our institutions. So to say there's no policy is incomplete. But when we talk about, there's been some things that have come up even more recently about this population, because you have older youth, obviously, they're staying with us longer. There has been some issues raised that we absolutely need to address. And so we've started to take an account of what those things will be. And I know Marianne has a lot of things that are sort of governing practice for the youth and for those working with the youth. But there are policies that do dictate a lot of different things in the facilities. They are just not specific to SYTF. So, yeah.
So maybe I missed it, but asking for some clarification here. Are you working on one?
Yes, I mean, there's, like I said, there's certain things that we've identified that we know need to fit into the policy. But at the moment, given what we have for DSB and for RTSB and for the facilities, we're in compliance with Title 15. We're doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing in terms of care and custody. The nuance is, are there specific things for an older population that we need to consider? And so things like something, for example, that's come up is lights out. And what is helpful for this older population, and how do we share that with staff who are working with that population? So those are the types of things I think that folks have raised as concerning, because there may be other considerations that we need to have for this older population. So those are the types of things that we need to start working on.
So start working on, meaning it hasn't happened.
We do not have a policy for SYTF. We have a policy that governs practice in the institutions for Detention Services Bureau and for Residential Treatment Services Bureau.
You know, Adam, I am, like everyone else, really looking forward to this being all figured out. And I think that we don't need to try to recreate the wheel. There's, if it's Youth Authority, DJJ, other sort of wheels that exist around the world or other states. I'm thinking, as someone who was in custody in the juvenile hall and then went into the California Youth Authority, it was night and day. And that was based on policies that were being carried out. This might be, at the bottom of the list, but I'm just thinking about even just basic commissary. Your family can send you a package if you're a youth who's in custody serving time. That doesn't happen in a juvenile facility. It's not even an option. It's not even something you would even think about. So there are things, if we're talking about reward and benefits for the youth, I mean, that's one simple low-hanging fruit there, that you can have a package system if that's sort of stealing one from the prison population. But that's just one of many spokes on that wheel. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not sure what needs to happen, if it's sort of us pressing you on that, but we really need to get that policy going.
No, I mean, these are really important questions, Chair Carrillo, and Marianne has started to map out some of those things. Commissary, what are, different clothes, different shoes, all of those things, right? So she's mapping all of that out with her team. It just hasn't been codified yet. So there's a lot of that stuff that's come together. We need to take that next step and put it into the policies so that people are feeling a little bit more protected.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, you're up.
Thank you. So looking at the proposed interim solution, it says 48 beds at Campus Kilpatrick. But in other times you've said that actually couldn't happen because there's no place for the staff to sleep, and we're keeping the 56-hour schedule so that we would never be able to have enough staff to actually have 48 people. Is that changing? How do we get to 48 people considering staffing? And also, I believe some beds had to be removed in order to get, or have been removed, but would have to be returned for 48 people. So if you could talk about that.
I don't recall stating that would never happen. I think we've raised some of the roadblocks to it. So the staff sleeping is an issue at the moment. There's nothing on the table to remove the 56-hour shift at the moment. We are taking a look at the administrative building at Camp Miller, and basically renovating that. So new paint, floor, lighting, so that staff can stay there. So that work is actually underway with ISD, and we think it'll be done in the coming months so that we won't have issues with the staffing. Again, we have been on record from the beginning that we want to recruit staff to work with this population. And so in order to do that, it requires some conversation with labor. If we don't do the recruitment, we are bound by the contract. So it's bidding rights. So those with seniority would go work with this population. And I think both actually labor and management agree that these folks should be hand selected as much as possible.
Okay, so I'm sorry I said never. You've never said that you can never do things. You've always said, here's the obstacle and we're working on it. Okay, so with this new sleeping arrangement you said work has already begun on renovating, will that enable there to be enough staff with the 56-hour work week to house 48 youth?
Yes.
And the question about the beds were removed to get it down to like 36. Beds would have to be put back into the dorms to get to 48. Is that right?
So I don't believe so, because some of the cottages were being utilized for other things. So there may be some moving of other things out of some of those cottages in order to move forward with that. And then something else that's on the table, and I don't know how much of this I have shared, but Camp Miller, there is some proposal to renovate a significant amount of that space to serve Campus Kilpatrick, to provide additional programming space, to redo the field because there's no green space really at Campus Kilpatrick. So to redo the field, to provide some additional programming space that will serve, and then the sleeping quarters as well to serve Campus Kilpatrick. So we think as that work gets underway as well, that's gonna move all the programming space, but we will be able to get 48 beds in there.
Okay, good. Another question, looking at the slides. I'm wondering if perhaps I was unfair with Chief Fletcher at one of our previous meetings, because I see again it's saying that Los Padrinos doesn't have enough space for programming. And yet you and I have walked around, we saw classrooms inside the units where that are being used for unhoused people. They're dilapidated, I guess, but there's a dozen classroom bungalows. I mean, I have not seen a facility that has more space than Los Padrinos. So can you explain to me what that comment is about?
So it is, and I apologize, it is vague. That's mostly for on the unit programming. So it lacks space in the living unit for programming, but you're absolutely right. We would just have to modify how we do that. So there
are classes in the living spaces.
In the new buildings,
we
yes.
walked around, there was a woman sleeping in one of them. She was like taking a nap.
Right. So in the two new buildings, yes. In the old buildings, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when I've gone to other facilities, there is not usually programming space inside the living spaces, aside from a common room. And yet I didn't see that this issue was brought up anywhere but Los Padrinos.
So it's a concern everywhere. When we talk about, so that's fair, and it should be. So programming space on the unit is a problem in almost all of our facilities. If you look at Barry J, for example, if you look at the non-compound units, there's no programming space there either. There's a little room, and I don't know the last time you were there, but there's that little room kind of tucked away inside the day room where some programming takes place. When we talk about renovation and some of the renderings that we've seen from DLR, who's the architect we've been working on, that's part of the renovation, is that you basically convert the rooms, and then you're decreasing the number of young people that would be in a unit so that you can create that extra space for offices and programming on the unit. The spot that does it best is Kirby. So Kirby has an office for the clinician in the living unit, in the cottage, and that is not something that exists in other places. And I think that's really the model especially for this population. This is something we've discussed with DMH, where we would really like to have a clinician in the unit whenever possible. So it is an unfair distinction, and I think we didn't intend to pick on LP. It is a problem in all of our facilities. But to your point, we would want to rethink how we do programming in these sites, because there is ample space, right? There's space all over the place at Los Padrinos, depending on what it's used for, who the population is. Those are some of the conversations that we're seeking to have. So for example, and not to get too far in the weeds on this, but could we potentially use Los Padrinos temporarily for pre-adjudicated while you do renovation to another site and prepare that for this longer term use? And one of the things that we have to understanding there's not a huge appetite to invest in incarceration in the county, what can be done? Because we have care and custody right now, and we have young people right now who could seriously benefit from better environments. I mean, I think we're all in agreement there. And so we're trying to address big part of this consideration right now is SYTF. But we also have to think longer term about what does care and custody look like in Los Angeles County. And if we're following what the county has decided, what the board has decided, some consideration for these facilities needs to be made to make them better, because these spaces are old and in some ways totally not conducive to any of the things that we hope for our kids.
I agree 100% with that. You said before you share our frustration. I believe you. I'll be honest, I'm kind of checked out on this because I'm so frustrated. The bottom line is I feel like we are exactly where we were over a year ago, with the exception of some youth being transferred to Kilpatrick. But other than that, we've made no progress. I met with juvenile justice advocates from up and down the state last week at a conference in Monterey, and it was awful to say where we're at in Los Angeles compared to where nearly every other county is at. Not that I'm happy with where they are, or that people in those counties are, but we are so much farther behind, I think, every other county, at least everybody I talk to. And I think it shows a degree, how do I say this? The inability of this county, probation department, the board of supervisors, us included, to commit to a plan after this long is one of the small handful of things that I've seen that is the most disheartening about things I've seen about county government in any capacity that I've worked on it. And I mean, this is really bad. And I also don't want to dismiss the seriousness of it. What we were talking about here are the youth who are in most need of rehabilitation. And without that, the community is at most risk. So we talk about, this group has been accused of not talking enough about victims' rights. I do think about victims. I think about the victims whose crimes could have been prevented had we had good rehabilitation programs for these future people who commit crimes. So we're not doing anything about any of that in tangible terms, right? So I know you share that frustration, but I just want to make sure that before we move on, that we recognize that this is the biggest failing of the probation department and the county and everybody involved, perhaps, since this commission was formed. And frankly, I hope that the BSEC or the state legislature or somebody steps in soon and just takes over this issue for the county. Do we need to send kids to other counties? Is Los Angeles not capable of having an SYTF facility? And that's what it appears to me. So if we are in another couple months still where we were a year ago, I really hope someone outside this county steps in and deals with this problem and recognizes that we're not capable of doing it. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Gilles. Adam, one last question for you. And a few months back, I made a huge assumption, and maybe I was right, but I'm under at this point. I was assuming that that probation is really excited about making Barry J. Noroff the SYTF site. And before you answer that, I, hearing you speak and these other comments that the commissioners are making, if that is the case, and it's not an assumption, why go through all these channels with the subcommittee that you chair and give the illusion that like we're waiting until this subcommittee makes a decision when we know, as you just pointed out, this DLR consulting company is involved and has been working on things. Is there something happening behind the scenes that probation is doing? And if so, what's happening?
So I want to make sure I understand the question specific to Barry J.
Specific to SYTF, I assume that you didn't say it, but I made the assumption that probation has taken that position, that they want Barry J. Noroff to be the SYTF site.
Mhm.
You didn't say it. I just was connecting some dots, but today I want to confirm.
So what I'll share is that we had some conversations about a year ago with board offices, and
We
there was
have
a
all these
motion.
good people.
Sorry,
We're losing your
I'm
connection
sorry.
again.
I'm sorry too. Oh,
I apologize. So
no,
I do want to answer the question. Good. Okay. So we did have some conversation with board offices about Barry J specifically, and about some plans to do that. There was a motion that was brought. Was it March 15th? It was the day. Yeah. The March 15th, there was conflicting motions at the board, and effectively the Barry J option was voted down, and so the board decided that Barry J was no longer an option. So we've proceeded to kind of work through this. The next step was to provide as much detail as we possibly could on Camp Scott, which we did subsequent to that. So I think sometime in the summer, I want to say August, we got all that work done. We submitted a report on Camp Scott as a viable option. Still no firm decision. And so we've been through kind of frankly spinning our wheels trying to figure out Barry J has become the default because we have youth there. And so there's still an opportunity potentially to consider it. It'll be on the table with the other facilities that I mentioned. But no, we don't have any at this point. We're not working in a different space with other folks having different conversations about any one facility over another. The conversations that are happening with members of the JJRBG have board offices present, and there's kind of an understanding that this is the next step because we've gone through this now several different times with several different motions. We need to come together. There needs to be some more collaboration, not probation going by itself, not JJRBG going by itself, together to make a recommendation to the board so we can get this resolved once and for all. And as much as, again, so we've tried to make the best of the situation that we're in, but again, it's understanding it's not ideal for anybody, mainly the young people at this point.
thanks, Adam, for the clarification. Sure. Don, you're up.
Yeah, mine's probably kind of off the wall, but how long have we known about DJJ coming to LA County? That was a question.
It preceded me, so this goes back to 2020.
Okay, so this is not on you, Adam, but there's sufficient time that this department should at least have had a plan in place by now. And as Commissioner Leyva pointed out, we're spinning our wheels. We really accomplished nothing in all this time. And I talked to some people who are subject matter experts on this concept, and they say we can't figure out why it's taking so long. Now I understand there's conflicting board motions and conflicting board philosophies, and care first, incarcerate less, got all that. But that we should be looking at, we should have been at this point in time, had a plan in place. I was just out at Silmar the other day talking to some of the youth out there, and they range from age from 15 to 21. And again, they're talking about lack of programming, lack of structure. They're sitting around listening to rap music. I'm just curious to when is it we're really going to have a plan that we can implement? That's just me.
Thank you, Don. Commissioners, any other comments? Adam, I really appreciate you, man. I know that from what I know, your job is a very hard job, and I really admire you and respect you, man. And I appreciate you showing up and answering these questions and keeping us abreast of what's going on.
Of course. Always. Thank you, Chair Creel.
Thank you. Okay, guys, I think we're in. It's almost 2:00, and it looks like there's no more questions or comments. So we will move into a short 10-minute break before we proceed to agenda number 7. We will take 10-minute break and resume promptly at let's just say 2:10. So we can do, well, actually it's Wendy, it's at 56 where you are.
You're the boss. Yes.
Let's go with 2:10. So you can stretch your legs a little bit. So see you back at 2:10.
Commissioners, if you want to turn on your video and let us know you're coming back, that would be great. So we can make sure we have quorum. Commissioner Canales, are you with us?
Yes, I'm back.
Great, thank you. So Commissioner Meredith, are you with us? I saw it sounded like you were in your car, or looked like you were in your car. All right, we have quorum back. Oh, great.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Okay, I'm out of the car.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. We're set. I didn't see Sean. Is there? There's Sean's on video. Everybody's back.
Yep, I'm back.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Wendy, how's my video or my audio? Can you hear me?
Video's fine. Audio is clear, but it's quiet.
Because I don't only see your video on, nobody else's. So maybe.
That is probably because of the strength of the Wi-Fi. Sometimes WebEx actually shuts down the video stream to help you with your Wi-Fi connection.
Okay, well, I think I need all the help that I can get. So moving on to item number 7, we will discuss and take appropriate action on the hiring freeze placed on juvenile supervision positions within the probation department of the Los Angeles County Executive Office, Chief Executive Office. Wendy will give us a backdrop of this conversation, and then we will go to public comments and then make a decision. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yes, I'm going to be very brief and just wanted to explain that this item was placed on the agenda at the request of commissioners, in particular after the LA Times article, which I believe is linked on the agenda, to give some context about why they had questions. And also because we've obviously had the item on the agenda previously. Just to let you know, this item came before the board. It's come before the board multiple times now, and is in hiatus, I guess is the best way to say. So there is a hiring freeze against juvenile institutions, which ends up being a de facto hiring freeze for the entire department because the department, for most positions, it's sworn positions, hires through the juvenile institutions. So that hiring freeze has been in place since before the pandemic. And was there was a hiring freeze countywide, but the hiring freeze was not lifted for a couple of departments, including juvenile institutions of probation, after the hiring freeze was lifted for the rest of the county. And the discussions at the board have gone in a multitude of different ways, including, I think, for purposes of this conversation, most recently an exchange between Supervisors Hahn and Barger and Chief Gonzalez, where they were discussing the actual impact of the hiring freeze on hiring, and where Chief Gonzalez explained the current hiring process, which Chief Bettino can definitely speak to since that's in his area, that's going on right now with a couple of new classes of recruits, and 150 positions that have been approved by the CEO's office for the probation department. The current recruit class is significantly under that 150 number. And the conversation at the board meeting was to suggest that because of the approved positions, the hiring freeze at this point didn't have really an impact on probation's ability to hire right now. But there's a long-term question about the hiring freeze and the implications on recruiting and hiring. So that is where we stand right now. It was on the agenda, was it 2 weeks ago, Adam? Not at this most recent meeting, but the meeting previous to that. And continued again. So I'm not sure when it's going to come up again. Do you know, Adam, when it will be before the board again? Has it been slated?
It is slated, I believe, for January 24th. It was continued to January 24th meeting.
Okay, so so that is the background of this conversation. Maybe, Adam, before we move on to the commissioners commenting, you could talk a little bit about the current recruit classes.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Wendy. So just a couple of things, and Wendy alluded to this. We have We have 15 recruits who are currently shadowing at Central Juvenile Hall and Barry J. They will be doing that for a couple more days. They're there just to kind of get a sense of sight and sound and some understanding of what the job is going to entail. They'll come back for a little bit more classroom learning, and then they will graduate. I want to say in the middle of January. We started last week. We started another class of 28. So we're getting to a couple of, we're getting some recruits through the pipeline. There's about 20 more right behind those who have been final cleared and accepted positions. So we think our third academy will start sometime in January. We're starting to overlap academies, which is not something that we've done for some time. We've introduced the shadowing part of the academy so that folks get a good sense of really what it means to work in the institutions. And then, we continue to have a retention issue. So the call outs, the leaves, all of those things that continue to happen are still problematic. And so we're trying to address retention as well. We'll be introducing a mentoring program shortly that will have veteran staff sort of taking on the younger staff and kind of guiding them along the way. And so, yeah, I mean, it's still underway. Without getting too much into it, we've shortened our timelines through the exam process and through backgrounds and things like that. Our team has done a lot of really good work to condense as much of the process as we can so that we are moving folks through. There's also kind of a recruitment effort underway. We're working really closely with DHR, big HR, as we say in the county. They're helping us with some recruitment strategies. And interestingly, so just so folks are aware, all the content, when we look at our examinations, the questions, the things like that, we're actually working with DYD to have them get eyes on the content to make sure that we are staying in alignment with Care First, Jails Last, and that, the hope is to continue to recruit folks who are aware of the reform efforts here in LA and where we're headed, not only as a department, but as a county. So those are just some highlights. And you're right. So there's a little bit more analysis, I think, that CEO is doing behind the scenes. All of that is scheduled to be done here in the coming weeks, and the item was continued to the end of January meeting to see. So they'll take it up again, I assume, and have some more discussion at the board.
Thank you for bringing that up, Adam. In fact, I should say that. So the CEO's office is working on a study that's looking at some of the right sizing numbers around the staff ratios and other issues. It's a pretty intense study of the probation department, which we're expecting soon from their office. So then just before we move into public comment, I'll just remind you that this body voted to recommend to the Board of Supervisors not to lift the hiring freeze. In fact, they didn't take a vote. They just continued the motion to a later time, but they did, in the discussion of that vote, discuss another option that the CEO brought some information forward, which is about lifting the hiring freeze in exchange for freezing a set dollar amount of probation's budget. That also was not voted on. It was something that was discussed by the supervisors, but not voted on. So that's where the item stands at this point. And I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Carrillo. But actually, maybe you're going to just turn it back over to me.
That's correct.
I don't see any public comment. If you'd like to comment, you can use the raise your hand function, dial *3 on your phone. Give it a second since I didn't give any warning for that. So we are on item number 8, talking about the department's hiring freeze, but I don't see any hands, Chair Carrillo.
Okay.
Did I miss one, Janae?
No, you didn't miss anyone.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Wendy. Commissioners, comments, questions? Vice Chair Jackson, you're up.
Thank you, Commissioner Carrillo. I was wondering, you said that you guys are working on some retention strategies. Chief Patino, can you say more about that?
So I'll try to be brief here. This is not a brief topic. I mean, really, we're talking about culture change, and how do we get there? Given the current crisis, really, I don't think there's another word for it. How do we how do we keep people? So we're trying to have a lot of conversations with staff about their reasons for coming to the department, but also why are they staying? To better understand. The other effort underway is we're working through DHR to bring on a consultant to help us with some of the culture and climate. So we have there. So it'll actually be a couple of consultants. One is on board as of like this week to help get a deeper. They're doing some research and analysis on some of the root cause associated with the absenteeism. So they're going to be conducting interviews with staff, but also looking at our data to get a better understanding of some of the reasons that folks are calling out and staying out. And then on another front, trying to address some of the cultural issues that we're aware of, bringing in a consultant to help with our strategic communication, maybe a full-blown strategic plan. We're not quite sure yet, but to certainly help us to address some of the culture and climate issues that we know that we have here. Some of it just anecdotally based on conversations that we've had. Some of it has to do with the launching of DYD and how the two agencies are going to work together moving forward. There's a lot of questions about how those things have come out and how they're communicated, and we think it has an impact on our staffing, but that's anecdotal. We need some more detail to really understand how best to attack this. So that's how we're going to move forward. But I have a lot to say here. I don't want to take too much time, but certainly something that we've circled as an ongoing issue for us.
Thank you for that. I was on a Zoom this morning. Georgetown University was hosting a meeting about staffing shortages. It's a national issue, right? It's not just a local one. It's not one that's just in a county. And I was really sort of eager to hear from some of the stakeholders and thought that maybe they would issue the aha moment, right? And that didn't really happen. But what I did appreciate was that much of the conversation was focused on or centered in staff wellness and us understanding when we have cultural issues that are this deep, we need to really focus on that as much as possible. And we have the conversations, right? We conduct the state interviews, but we've known about the shortages for a while now, right? We've known about the culture issue for a while now. What kind of actual action has the department taken since we've been having this conversation to support staff wellness, stress inoculation? I think you guys have the DBT. I heard you mention that there's like DBT training in the works, but I'm just wondering who's checking on the staff and who has been checking on the staff while all of these complaints about safety, well-being, all of that has been sort of, in the climate, if you will.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So we have peer support. We've expanded training and things like vicarious trauma, so we have better understanding. And peer support really is something that's been a really good tool. We have wellness teams who go out. For example, if a staff is injured, they go and check on the staff to see how they're doing, trying to sort of welcome staff back into the fold. So those are some very specific things that we've done, but we're continually looking at more things that we can potentially be doing. And you're right, it is a national issue. We're trying to learn from other jurisdictions as well, trying to figure out what exactly is going on and what are some things that we can do to address. I think you all know that we've offered some incentives to staff. It's not all the way there, right? In terms of it's just financial. It's a benefit, a little bit of an added incentive for coming to work. And then it's also incentivizing folks who want to volunteer to come work overtime in the institutions. But that doesn't really get to what you're asking, Vice Chair. And some of the ways that we're addressing that is through our peer supporters and trying to get folks as much support as we can when they call for it. And then just checking on folks. Like I said, we have a wellness team that does go out to visit folks to see how they're doing. To talk to them about, maybe coming back to work if they've been out for some time and just seeing what they need to feel safe to come back to work.
That's great. I also heard about the peer support model and think that it's worked for some jurisdictions. It's worked for some departments. But are you hearing back from the staff? Is that something that's working? Are you evaluating that? Or is it something that's just put in place as, it's a bit of a placeholder?
No, I mean, the feedback is overwhelmingly positive. We also have probation support services, free psychological services for all of our staff. And part of that too includes family. So if folks are, for example, if you want to seek some marital counseling, you can go with your spouse, or your spouse can go to seek some counseling, and that's all confidential. It's all totally free to our employees. So we do have those services, and then that same group of psychologists offers ongoing training for staff who are interested on various topics. So there's a couple of tools that people have at their disposal, and all the feedback back that we've received is overwhelmingly positive. And there's also been times where I've referred staff who I know are going through some crisis, loss of a loved one or some other things going on, where we're able to refer on behalf of somebody else. And it's a warm handoff. It's somebody for them to speak to if they would like to, who's actually a professional. So there's a lot of that happening as well.
Okay. Has the department ever considered maybe having like a wellness center that's specific for staff on site?
So Chief Gonzalez has actually raised that. So in San Diego, within their training center, they have a wellness center that's there. That's staffed by some of their mental health partners, behavioral health partners. That is something that he has been seeking to get done here for our staff as well. So it's something that's kind of in the works, but it hasn't come to fruition yet.
Okay. Thank you for that, Chief. Gonzalez, I'm sorry, not Gonzalez, Bettino. I'm going to shift gears slightly. So obviously, shortage is a huge issue. And I think we're all just a bit intolerant of any excuse about why we haven't made more progress. It's an HR issue. We've got people in the academy, people in the pipeline, and eventually we'll have more staff, but I'm not optimistic that staffing levels will reach, they'll be satisfactory. Well, this will be an ongoing issue. So I'm wondering if the department is engaging in any other type of scenario planning where you're, I guess, sort of exploring different solutions in the context, or with all the constraints in mind. You know what I mean? I just hear they were saying we're hiring people, we're doing this, we're trying to do that. Oh, we've got an exception to the hiring freeze, but we still can't reach the levels that we're trying to reach. But is the department looking at anything else in real time so that the youth can get the programming that they need? You know, like anything happening in this moment? That's going to increase their chances of just having better experiences right now, because right now that it's just not happening.
So I think as quickly as we can ramp up the credible messengers, that's going to be really good. So that's just an added support to come in and provide support to our young people. So that's one thing that we're working closely with DYD to expand. The other part is, so the answer is yes, that we're constantly evaluating. The problem that we have at the moment won't be solved by bringing in 150 new staff. I just want to be clear about that. So we have lost 150 staff since January, just to attrition. So those are folks who either from the detention services pool. So it's a finite group of staff. Anytime we promote, you're pulling from the same group of staff to promote. Folks retire, we haven't been able to backfill. So you have vacancies in adult and other places in juvenile field, because you have we didn't hire for the better part of 18 months. And so we weren't doing enough to keep up with attrition. So this number is going to fill a hole that already exists, if that makes sense. Now it's helpful on the front end because you get people in the door and you have some new folks to provide support in DSB, but it doesn't help further downstream when you talk about the vacancies in adult or folks who want to promote. So part of the ongoing analysis is really department wide. We have to look at the whole picture, and some of that analysis is taking place now, where we're looking at the whole picture, the whole universe of staff, and what are we really going to need moving forward. And some of that has been, really initiated by board action and some of the things that you're hearing from the board. So we'll get a clearer picture of that in the coming weeks, but that's something that's always underway in the background, trying to take a look at our resources and seeing where we can make better better use of resources in different places.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that that answer is helpful, but credible messengers are not really going to help the youth come out of the room, more often if there's a staffing shortage. It's helpful to have them there as a resource, but it's really not going to mitigate some of the issues that we have that are specific to staffing, that's affecting programming, that's causing them to be in their rooms longer, that's making them lash out, this sort of cyclical effect that's all revolving around the staffing issue.
Yeah.
There's just obviously ongoing concern that there's not enough happening right in this moment as youth are detained to just make the experience just more livable. I think part of the issue is that the conditions are just not acceptable. And if you have like the frustration from the youth, I believe it was brought to my attention this week that they were Dr. Reynoso, you can confirm this, or Commissioner Meredith, throwing urine or collecting urine in water bottles because there's not enough staff in the unit to allow them to come out. I mean, little things like that, like those are really big issues that we want to eliminate, like today, if we could. Commissioner Meredith, would you mind giving a little bit more context into that issue? Because I know Erica was helping me out, but I wanted maybe a fuller picture of what happened.
No, it was explained to me, and a couple of youth I talked to admitted that they were part of the problem. There had been a disturbance, and it started with when two of the younger ones did not want to go to their cells for the evening night, 8:30 or whatever it was, retreat. At some point in time, they were being defiant, and staff had a call for, they said SEO, I'm not sure who it was, but extra bodies to come in there, at which time they put everybody on the floor, allegedly, then allegedly started strip searching them, and then they put them in their cells and said, for security reasons, we don't have enough staff. You got to stay in your cell. There's no head call tonight. If you got to use the head, you're going to have to do it in your cell. That's the sanitized version. And I've heard this before, and like I say, and it was again because they said they didn't have adequate staff for the security measures, which I'll follow up when I get my turn on here about staffing.
So I will just say, I mean, we have looked into that specific incident, and based on conversations that we've had with staff, we're not able to corroborate that actually did occur. We do have SEO who's helping on overtime from time to time in various units. We do, as you all know, have SEO responding to some incidents, but in terms of urinating in their rooms and things like that, that is not a practice that we condone. And if that's happened, then we will certainly be launching an investigation to look into that, because that's wildly inappropriate.
Commissioner Meredith.
Okay, you're not going to have the answers to this, Chief Patino, and my frustration is not focused on you, trust me, but it does come out, and you have to be the brunt of it. But I'd be curious to see how many of the people we've hired in the last 2 years as DSOs are still with the agency, and how many have left, and to why they left. The other side of that equation is I've talked to people that were in DJJ staffing it and other places, and there's got to be a consequence for bad behavior. We have to agree to that. We can't let people run amok. But we need to have established policies and guidelines and adequate resources. Have we taken a study and talked to what I'll say the line supervisors and line officers on ideas they may have of how to mitigate the safety issues in the facilities? I just was at a meeting just now with a guy from CDCR who says, hey, I can teach you people how to manage this operation. This is not new to us, based on what I was explaining to him. So I'm just looking, is there a viable study going on about how we're going to address these safety issues? Because, right, wrong, or different, we're going to have to keep people, in these facilities for a period of time, and we've got to keep them safe from themselves and keep staff safe. If we're not keeping staff safe, they're all going to call in, they're all going to quit. And I'm just looking for a viable answer. And I'd kind of like to have the department have something in place very shortly, because we're bleeding through, we can't even stop the bleeding. That's more of a statement than a question. But it goes back to the staffing issue: is do we have adequate staffing in this, in the various locations? If we don't have adequate staffing to escort youth out of their cell who are combative to the bathroom, then we have to look at how we're going to resolve that problem with staffing. Whether it be reserves, but we'd have bodies to fill the overtime. Anyway, it's more of a rant. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kakani?
Thank you. It's hard to even go into the details. I'm just like looking at this agenda between items 5, 6, and 7, right? Item 5, where probation kind of opted to, I don't know, and to some degree, protect their reputation at the expense of young people. That also impacted your staff. You know, item number 6, talking about secure youth treatment facilities, that's been on our radar for over 2 years. And the fact that we still don't have policies written that, again, harm young people, that we still don't have like a plan to recruit folks who are dedicated to supporting these young people, who I think one of the commissioners stated are probably, it might have been Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, who stated are like in like the greatest need of like healing and rehabilitation. And then item 7, which is this LA Times article, you know, connected to this LA Times article, and this idea that it's like a shock that young people are oftentimes relegated to using the restroom in their cells because either there aren't staff who are willing to let them out or available to let them out. It's not a new issue, right? Like the Department of Justice sued LA County Probation because young people said that they were banging on their cells to use the restroom and had to resort to like empty apple juice containers. So it's just, I don't know, part of this feels wildly frustrating to me, but like we're acting as if this is a crisis that just generated out of like, I don't know, the last few months, but like this has been a state of crisis that has existed for decades. And so it's frustrating to me that we are placing like all of our like hopes and dreams on like the hiring of new staff, because it doesn't feel like that's the answer. And I don't know to like what extent there is room for like creativity. And I appreciate you naming the credible messengers and like other folks who can support young people in more meaningful ways. But I don't know, I'm just at a loss for words. And maybe this is a rant too. And I'm not really I'm not asking a question or seeking an answer, but it just, I'm just like, I'm at a loss for how an institution can get so many passes, and the folks who pay like the greatest price are these young people, because it just feels like we're doing far more harm than good. And it just feels important to name the tragedy that this is. And maybe we're setting staff up to fail, but we are certainly setting up these young people to fail too. So just wanted to name that part.
Thank you, Commissioner. Adam, let me ask you, by any chance, do you have or can get just an idea for us about how many people apply? And I assume the application is online, either, I guess, I mean, just once a month. I'm just curious to know, like, who actually goes on your site and actually goes through the entire application process and hits submit. Any chance, do you know?
So let me quickly, well, not for today. So there's a bunch of data that we're gathering on this on a regular basis, especially given this this rush that we're under to move forward. So we can certainly provide that data. Previously, I knew our fallout rate through the process was pretty high. We made some modifications to the background process. For example, we got rid of the polygraph, and we modified the marijuana question because it's obviously, you know, mostly legal at this point. So we made some modifications there. So that has decreased our not only the timelines, but it's decreased the number of disqualifications that we're seeing in the background process. So we started, I think, in this exercise sometime in the summer, I want to say, with over 1,000 applicants, 1,200, I want to say, and it's now it whittles down over time. So you have people who don't pass the written exam, for example, so they fall out, and then they get to backgrounds and they don't show up for the appointment, and then we get, you know, further down from there. That's certainly something that we can share, but it does take quite a bit to get us to the numbers that we're seeing now. So we have, I think it's 44 in academies. We started with, I think, before backgrounds, so those that have kind of passed the testing and all of that to enter into backgrounds, it's something closer to like 800. And then you see some, like I said, disqualifications along the way. People don't show up, people don't submit their documents in a timely manner, and so they fall out that way. I hope that answers your question, but we can certainly provide some concrete data if the commission's interested.
I'm interested. I'm just wondering who's out there just jobless and thinking, or maybe want a career change,
Sure.
and just look up your department and say, let me apply,
Yeah.
and just get an idea of who what the numbers are there. Because I'm sure there's recruiting going on, but I just think about just like a good old fashioned somebody who just wants to work for probation.
Yeah.
Don, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to put out there, I know sometimes we come across very negative on staff and employees, which is not true. The majority of personnel that works in this department really are committed and hardworking, trying to make a difference at both the adult and the juvenile level. And sometimes the frustration comes out. And this came up before. It's a small nucleus of problems that we have, much of which I think is facilitated because of policies. But the employees, generally speaking, are good, hardworking people, and that sometimes goes unnoticed. And I just want to toss that out there after my last rant.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Don. Anyone else before we move on? Yep.
I'm sorry.
Vice Chair, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Carrillo. Mr. Bettino, I just had a question before we close out this item. Are line staff in any way involved in any committees or around any planning when it comes to really any of the issues that we bring up? Or is it just sort of a top-down, policy prep, things are sort of just implemented? Are they engaged, involved in decision-making processes and anything like that?
So we can always do much better in that space. Most of the engagement that we do with line staff comes through our conversations with our labor partners. And so we have heard from them. And I forget who asked about are we engaging line staff and supervisors about some of the safety concerns? I think it was Commissioner Meredith asked this. So we certainly have regular conversations with them, and we're listening through what their solutions may be on this front exactly, or what types of trainings do they need. DHR actually helped us do a lot of survey of staff, and I think, Wendy, that's one of the things that you all requested and we have provided at this point. So you can take a look at that information, and it's very specific anonymous surveys about all of these areas, about safety, about training, about professional development. And so those are some of the things that we're very focused on moving forward when we start to talk about retention and what are some of the things that we want to make sure that we're addressing. But we can always do better on that front for sure.
Of course. I mean, I get feedback every now and then that it just feels like maybe the staff who are expected to show up and actually execute the service, if you will, at the service delivery point, they're not included in the process enough. And that is, part of the issue here. Like when solutions are devised, that perspective is not included. And oftentimes, not oftentimes, if you don't have staff's buy-in, the strategy is just not going to be successful. And I feel like that's in large part the reason why we have this revolving door. You're barking demands at them, but you're not including them in the solution. So that's part of it for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
And before we officially close out, Adam, I am hearing this thing about the urine for a little bit too long now, and I'm really worried about what's going to happen when that mental breakdown happens or a physical emergency happens and those calls are being ignored. So I think the urine is one thing that people are focusing on as, someone has to take a pee or use a bathroom.
Yeah.
But those calls where there's actually a real live emergency that's not a crying wolf, whatever. It's actually they need an adult help, and it's maybe just flat out not heard. So something to consider, Adam.
Yes.
Moving on, item number 8, we will hear updates from the Executive Director, Wendy Julian, on the POC's progress towards completing its 2022 strategic goals, which will include updates on the OC spray deployment, the launching of the POC's data dashboard, progress on sexual misconduct hearings, and POC inspections. Wendy, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Carrillo. I hope you'll indulge me. I have a longer report today than usual, lots of important things to share. I wanted to start by thanking the employees who have attended our town halls, as well as the commissioners who attended the town halls. I actually think a number of the questions you heard in the last few items come directly from some of the things that we heard in those town halls. It's always a risk to come and talk about concerns you might have about your job. And it's only through that level of risk taking we're actually going to be able to move forward. And I just thought it was a really helpful experience. I also appreciate leadership's support of our conducting those and the unions for, in the last case, providing space and dinner for us to do that. So it provided the opportunity for some very frank conversation. I think you can see that the commissioners listened and will continue to ask questions as they continue to push forward. I said this in the public safety cluster meeting yesterday, and I'll say it again as I move into talking about OC spray. I believe that the reason that I decided to do this job myself and working in probation oversight is because I really believe that the probation department, and in particular the staff of the probation department, have not only the will, but the ability to make the changes that have been set forth for them. I think there are lots of folks who agree with the changes and lots of folks who have the capacity to do it. And it's a matter of getting in a place where it's people feel motivated and safe and with a shared agenda to move forward. So with that level of optimism, I will say that I reported back to you a couple months ago on our progress on the 2022 goals with our strategic plan, which is really significantly positive. Yet the overall accomplishment toward the goals of moving things within the department is not so positive. So many things, in fact, I think are in some ways in a worse condition than they were when we first started. And that's frustrating and also calls into question how we've set our benchmarks and measurements about success for the Probation Oversight Commission. So we are actively looking for a new strategic planning consultant to help guide us in how we set those goals to push the actual achievement of the departmental movement forward, in addition to just accomplishing those things that we set before us that are within our control. That's a hard thing to do, but it's certainly what we were created for as a body. And I am thankful to the commissioners for their willingness to continue holding themselves accountable and the staff accountable towards moving that direction. With respect to OC spray, those of you who attended our last meeting on the 16th of November heard an incredible report from Dr. Gongora, which resulted in, which was the result of many hours of study of the data that probation has so willingly provided to us about OC spray, and showed some really concerning upticks in the use of OC spray in some facilities, one facility, Central Juvenile Hall, and some of the units, particularly within the facility. I will say that at the meeting, we heard Superintendents Bima and Jones talk about the expectation that at today's meeting, we would be able to report a significant decline in the use of OC spray, and that is in fact the case. There is an update to the OC spray report attached to the agenda today that shows that the number of deployments of OC spray in November is about half of what it was in the preceding month. It still is approximately a spray a day. Still alarming numbers, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, too many, but really tremendous improvement over the months before. What the cause of that decline is, I actually wish we knew. I think Chief Patino wishes we knew too. We'd really like to have more information about why these things are happening and the success that we've seen in particular in some units. And we're continuing to work with the department to get better data on these issues so that we can help to pinpoint things specifically. The Probation Oversight Commission is going to help with that by continuing to publish and even publish in a much more public-friendly facing dashboard, the OC spray over the time so that we can make sure that people know that there are eyes on it. I think that actually is probably a partial contribution to the decline. And in my meetings with the chiefs, they have discussed movements that they're making around both an early intervention system that will help to look at incidents that happen involving OC spray and other incidents that happen, and ways to improve that within the facilities. And also looking at staff issues and whether there are actually specific places where there are things that are occurring that don't go along with the direction in which both the department and the county are asking us to go, which is phasing out OC spray. So I will say that the update is both a congratulations on a remarkable improvement by the department, and also a motivation to continue working toward getting this number to 0, which is where it should be. So please take a look at that updated report. I mentioned the POC data dashboard. So we are actually in sort of final construction phases of an outward facing dashboard that will be a much easier way for you all. And by this, I mean all people who work in the county and people who are members of the public and everyone who listens, to be able to see regular updates on statistics of who is in the facilities. We get daily information from the department, and we'll be providing that on a monthly basis so that you can see the trends, the increases and decreases at different facilities. And then, as I said, also providing information on the OC spray data. We're hoping to launch early 2023. It's getting very close, and really thankful to the Data and Research Committee, in particular, Commissioner Danielle Dupuy, who's been, she's absolutely the expert on these issues and has been really fantastic in terms of helping us move forward. Then I will mention the annual inspections. So we have the official Rocky, Afterbaugh, and Page inspections attached to this week's report. Dr. Reynoso gave a thorough overview of those inspections at the last meeting. So what's left is Kilpatrick and then the 2 halls. So the inspections are completed. Our staff is working on merging all the notes from the different commissioners together and getting those ready. We will turn them in to both the department, most importantly, and the and actually, as I say that, I think we have, in fact, turned in the reports, some of the reports to the department, but we'll be getting the reports on the halls and Kilpatrick to the department, and then to the BSCC and to the board, and presenting on those in January. We're actually doing that fairly intentionally because last year we presented them in December and nobody read them. And then we presented them again in the spring and a whole bunch of people read them. So we learned from our mistake, and we'll be presenting them so that they get the attention they deserve early in 2023. And then finally, I would like to say that we had, and actually I'm going to ask Commissioner Jackson to add on to these comments. We had a really, I don't even know what the word to use is, Commissioner Jackson. It was a great meeting with some of the attorneys and victims of the alleged sexual misconduct that have been willing to talk to us about their potential involvement in hearings going forward. And it was illustrative both to me in a personal way as well as in a thoughtful way with respect to how we might go forward as this commission. And I think we have some really great thoughts. We're actually going to convene the subcommittee back because it was just myself and Commissioner Jackson in that meeting, so that we can determine how to go forward with next steps. So Commissioner Jackson, I will turn it over to you to add more comments about that.
I'm happy to say a few things. So as Wendy said, we met with some of the survivors. There was some interesting conversation about the difference in language and choosing to sort of call them victims versus survivors. And I think we want to respectfully sort of refer them as survivors in this context. But we had a really great meeting with them last week, and the goal was to get their blessing on our plan to conduct these meetings, right? And to reinforce our goal to allow them to shape this entire process, to not only shape it, but spearhead it in some ways. And most importantly, allow them to express the outcomes that they would like to see, right? This is about them. And although this process is in part about holding the probation department accountable for what I see to be poison in their system, right? In its system, it's a real aim for us to uplift the stories of the women in a way that will allow them to live healthier lives going forward. You'd be surprised, even after all these years, for some of the victims, the gaping hole that's been left in their lives after surviving some of these incidents. I heard some of it in the meeting that we had. And I think in the interest of supporting the long-term or their long-term well-being, we want to not only conduct the hearings, but we also like to, we also like to establish a victim fund so that they can access quality to mental health services. And so this is like a sort of double-pronged process where it's about uplifting the testimony, the stories. It's about the accountability piece, but it's also providing them something, a material benefit, if you will, something to support their emotional well-being, something that's going to hopefully promote and foster healing in their lives. And that's what in part this is about. And so I'd like to put forth a motion at some point. I don't know if now is the appropriate time to do that or wait until we are, the commissioners weigh in after public comment. But yeah, we'd like to propose a motion to begin the latter process of starting the fund. So thank you, Wendy, for letting me comment.
Thanks, Commissioner Jackson. I'll let Alex correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you could actually put forward the motion now and then we go to public comment and then come back for discussion and decision. Does that sound right, Alex? You can go ahead, Commissioner Jackson.
Okay, let me know if I need to make any adjustments to the motion. But I move to have the Probation Oversight Commission staff research and report back on existing models of victim assistance funds for mental health services by our next meeting. We're hoping that the study, or not, we're hoping the study should highlight the examples of successful funds, best practices, strategies, and the challenges associated with an initiative like this. Does that suffice, or should I revise it?
If you're asking me, I think you stated it. I don't know whether people need to hear it again.
Commissioners, should I restate the motion?
Doesn't sound like it.
Hearing no feedback, if someone would,
You've already said enough to get my vote.
okay.
Can we get a second on this, please?
Then I'll second it.
There you go.
Thank you.
Let's open the floor for discussion. Anyone that has any discussion on this?
I think, Chair Carrillo, if we could go to public comment first about my whole report and then come back before we take a vote.
Okay, we
That
should have
work
just
for you?
waited then, but okay, sure, go for it.
Okay, so if you'd like to make public comment on any of the aspects of what item are we on here? Number 8, the executive director's report, or on Commissioner Jackson's motion, please raise your hand or dial *3 on your phone. We have one person signed up, so we'll unmute you in just a second. It's Jackie from Young Women's Freedom Center. And if we can put the timer up, we'll get you unmuted. And Jackie, you can begin.
Hi, you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to comment about what Ishay said. It hit me hard because I've been trying to fight for this other lawsuit because there's a lawsuit going on, but so when there's the unfits that got a group of unfits in 2008 that something happened where they trained us to squat and cough before we went to prison. But it wasn't policy and it wasn't right. And they would make us literally in Silmar, and then they shot us to LPJK. It was 14 of us, and they would make us literally, like take everything off, spread our butt cheeks or whatever, and sometimes even touch our hands, and like to do it right, to train us till we got to prison. And that was nowhere like supposed to happen. And then I called all the people for these lawsuits of that are happening right now, and they said that it's not the same because it's not a sexual assault. And so then I was kind of confused because yeah, it's not rape, but it's a lot of the girls got messed up over it, like, and then it became a normal thing. So it's like I didn't know what to do about it. So I don't know. I'm just thinking like if this fund is specific for that, can something happen where it'll be open? Or because I really believe that I'm gonna make another lawsuit for my girls. But can this be like open to like that as well? Or like, I don't know how you guys are gonna do it, but I would love for my girls to still be able to do that because they feel like their voices aren't being heard right now. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jackie. Next up is Green Thumb ABU.
Overwhelming.
You can begin.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's overwhelming. Everything that all of the committee have mentioned are all priority issues. I'm a believer in educating and enriching the youth as well as maintaining the safety for our staff, and would implement services so that we could properly rehabilitate them. Everything that these concerns, I believe, is in listening to Commissioner Garcia, he raised very good points in working with other counties, surrounding counties, and then adjusting to LA County to develop enrichment centers to make our at-risk youth an asset by rehabilitating them and training them for occupational positions in which could assist us with building our economy, as well as lifting the morale of our county. And listening to Mr. Don, he makes a very good point. The programs, we need to teach them. A lot of them don't know. We're dealing with a culture, and we have to take into consideration, as one commissioner spoke about, mental health. We have to look at the culture in which these children come from, which are our millenniums. A lot of these children are from child abused homes, drug addicted mothers, and these are the results from our 89, well, I would say our 92,000 kids. Me being rehabilitated, but was expunged at 16, going through Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. I'm now 55.
That's
Hello.
your time. That's your time. Thank you. I really appreciate that comment. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for sharing the comments about your personal experiences. That's brave and helpful. Okay, I don't see any other hands. Chair Carrillo, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. And I will open up the conversation for the motion discussion. I see Vice Chair's hands up.
I just wanted to take a moment to respond to the public comment from Jackie. I actually happen to know Jackie. We were in juvenile hall together back in 2005. So it's really nice for her to be engaged in this way. And yeah, I hope she's proud of me. In response to your question, this is all about my motion. In fact, is about this being in its infancy stage. We're trying to do the information gathering so we can figure out who this fund applies to. We certainly don't want to exclude people who are not a part of this lawsuit, right? Because I mean, we just don't know. I think the simple answer is we don't know yet. And if there is some sexual assaultive component to what happened and then being violated, then maybe it could be elevated to this. But as far as I know right now, this is just us trying to figure out what is possible with the fund. And as soon as we're able to develop more of that, then we'll release it in future meetings. But I do appreciate the comment.
Wendy?
I will just echo that and say that Young Women's Freedom Center would probably be my first call in doing research into the possibilities for something like this. So thank you.
Did I hear the motion again?
You sure can. I made a motion to have the probation oversight staff research and report back on existing models of victims assistance funds for mental health services, and that should be done by our next meeting. The study should highlight examples of successful funds, best practices around establishing them and maintaining them, strategies, and the challenges associated with an initiative like this. So just a bit of a feasibility study and report back to us so then we can decide where we go from there.
Speaking on where do we decide to go from there, Shay, what are you thinking about whatever the results are? Are you thinking that the POC would manage the fund?
We don't know. It's probably going to be managed by the county or something like it. It's just literally too soon to say who's going to manage it, who's going to, we're just trying, we know that the victims deserve it. We know that we want to get them access to quality mental health care, right? And this is the beginning stage of that, right? We can figure out who's going to administer it, who has access, who's eligible, all of that in due time, I'm hoping. Don?
No, before we go to Don, sorry, I'm not
Oh, yeah.
done yet. So you're saying the mental health care. Is this about the fund or about mental health care?
Well, the
What's the-
fund is specific to mental health care. So we're not just procuring like resources just for the sake of mental health, but obviously mental health is very expensive. And so this fund is for that.
Okay. Don, you're up.
Yeah, I think the DA's office and maybe the Attorney General's office for California manage existing victims assistance funds, but I don't know if any of that's particularly to mental health. And then where would the funding come from would be a question I'd have, but I guess that would be staff's job to find. But the DA's office and I believe the AG's office already have actually established victims assistance funds.
Well, that's great. Staff, I'm sure they're noting that.
Any further discussion on this motion? Okay, seeing none. Wendy, can you? Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say one thing. I just want to thank Commissioner Jackson. I know how emotionally exhausting this must have been. So thank you.
I think I might need some therapy after too. Thank you, Commissioner Garcia-Lays.
Dolores?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm driving, so I hope I don't break up, but thank you for putting forth this motion. But I'm also wondering, for the sake of so many motions and just the length and everything of how long this might take, if we could also right now get some resources and lists to provide these young individuals a list of where they might be able to go for immediate assistance, free of charge. I know that there is some places, although it might not be near enough of what they need right now, but just for an immediate resource.
Yeah, we're going to be, thank you, Commissioner Dolores. We're going to be meeting with them again next week. I think we're meeting with them again next week, and we'll get a clearer sense of what it is that they actually need and how we can be helpful in the meantime, because with pending litigation and we don't know exactly when the hearings will be scheduled, sometime next year, I do agree that, it would be nice for them to have access to something immediately. And so
Right, thank you. And even referring them to some of the partner organizations, like Young Women's Freedom Center, where Jackie is at. And I'm so proud of her. And it was really great to have these calls and this feedback. Thank you.
yeah, for sure. And I'll just say this, one of the victims or survivors that we spoke with is already involved in an organization that is focused on providing services to young women who are victims of sexual assault. Is that correct, Wendy? I don't want to misspeak.
That's my understanding.
Okay, yeah. So they already have I would say maybe the appropriate community surrounding them, but it's about maximizing access to resources. And if we can be helpful in that way, we'd like to.
Vice Chair. Don, is your hand up again? Thank you, Don. Okay, I think we're ready for a vote, Wendy.
Okay, I'm just going to read the roll call unless anyone needs me to needs Commissioner Jackson to reread the motion. Okay, Commissioner Canales?
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia-Lays?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kakani?
Aye.
Commissioner Meredith?
Aye.
Commissioner Carrillo.
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you for that motion. Okay, moving on now to item number, wait a minute, number 9.
I'm
Uh,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that
Oh.
was I actually have another item that I'd like to address. This is about us addressing all of Wendy's report, right? Or is
I
it
guess
just
now, yep, I guess now we're going into, yep.
Well,
Sorry
because
about that, Wendy.
she listed several things, and I
Floor is
actually
yours.
had
Yep.
okay, sorry about that, Commissioner Carrillo. So the other thing I needed to respond to Wendy's report back on the OC spray. Obviously, the findings, the data was problematic in showing that the OC spray was deployed at disproportionate rates, but also used amongst our most vulnerable populations incarcerated right now. And so I'd like to propose another motion that forces the department to employ other methods of addressing disturbances instead of instead of spraying youth. So if I could make another motion, that would be appreciated. I know that we're coming up on time here, but I'd like to state.
Please proceed.
Okay. So I've written it out here. The motion is for the Probation Oversight Commission. So the Probation Oversight Commission recognizes a pattern of disproportionate use of OC spray on youth who have been identified as especially vulnerable in detention settings, including girls and youth with developmental disabilities. The probation department responded by saying they will not gather data regarding the frequency youth get sprayed And probation has responded they will not gather the data regarding how frequently youth are sprayed. And since the phase out of OC spray has been grossly stalled, the POC recommends that the board take action by calling for a pilot phase out of the use of OC spray in units designated for girls and youth with developmental disabilities. A mouthful for sure. Let me know if I need to restate that, but this is basically asking for a pilot phase out of the use of OC spray in those units where we saw very high rates of OC spray deployment.
Can we get a second on this motion from anyone? Is your hand up, Don, for
Don,
that?
I think Don wants to.
Oh,
Yeah,
we have
I
to
was
get a
just going to chime in. First of all, I had a question. Probation's not providing information requested from us on the use of OC spray. Is that correct? Did I hear that right?
Wendy can confirm that, but as far as I know, yes.
So probation provides regular information to us on the use of OC spray, and it includes the frequency of uses specific to the day of use and the unit in which it's used. So we can extrapolate from that the units where we know that developmentally disabled youth and girls we know which units they are, and we know where the OC spray occurs. What they can't do is indicate on an individualized level, this spray happened and the youth who was sprayed is developmentally disabled or has an open child welfare case, or that kind of level of detail, because of how I want to use the right word, and I can't remember what it is, the word that Chief Fletcher used. It's labor intensive, I think, is the word that she used. So that in order to get that data, it's really challenging because you have to look at, I think, physical files to get a sense of what that data is, and that therefore the continued information will have to be just extrapolated based on who we know is in which unit. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Meredith?
Well, actually, it raises another question. One is, this is labor intensive. I'm not so much worried about that, because if they're deploying OC, I'm going to presume there's a written report that goes with it. And in that report, somebody can highlight, yes, this person has whatever difficulty it is. We don't have to have identifying information, but at least it just says what the issue is. Because I don't want to take away a tool that may be necessary in some situations and jeopardize the safety of staff or the youth in there. And I'm recognizing the need with females and the disabled. However, without real factual information from the department on that, I would have a hard time with this motion. Secondly, I'm really troubled if the department says it's labor intensive, because I'm sure there's somebody on light duty status, if nothing else, that could extrapolate that for us. But it should be contained within a use of force report. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, commissioners, we're still looking for someone to second this motion before we open into discussion.
Sorry, does that motion need to be seconded before it's discussed?
Yes. That's what I tried to do earlier, but somebody called on Don.
All right, I'll second it.
There you go. Okay, floor is open for discussion.
So I'll go first. I'm not sure I'm ready to vote on this right now, though.
Okay.
The reason is how this interacts with the existing OC spray phase out plan seems, I'm not able to wrap my head around it this quickly. So that's my concern. What is it? I can't visualize. What would this look like with respect to the current plans? Is it in addition? Does it replace? Does it require labor negotiations? Does it interact with the Department of Justice's settlement? It seems like there's a whole lot of other players in this besides us. So I'd want to be more, I don't know. I need more before I could say it's a good idea or not.
I agree. I think it's one of those things. May I respond to that? Because I actually think that it was a difficult motion for me to put forth, but we know that we agree with the board's decision to or approval of the phase out of OC spray, right? And we know that developmentally disabled and women are overrepresented in the deployment of the spray, right? And if it feels more tangible to say, let's start there, maybe as a phase out approach, it would be, especially knowing that it's difficult for us to access the data. Why don't we start there? But I can't say that we've done enough due diligence in sort of determining why that group is most appropriate and how it's going to be done in order to carry the motion successfully. But I do think that starting with a smaller group for the sake of trying to phase it out, it is probably more approachable and maybe more feasible if we can't get the information that we need. But I don't know if that's a real challenge. It sounds like we can compel probation to get us that information. We don't necessarily have to require for it to be phased out to do that, but instead of, it could be done. I don't know.
Don?
Well, we're well past the phase out phase, got that, but we still have disturbances and assaults taking place at a substantial rate. And many of our probation staff are slight in stature, for lack of a description. However, I would prefer the motion to say we're going to request, demand, compel, whatever the probation department to extrapolate the information required, at least for the past 60 days or 90 days, whenever this report reflected that increase, and give us that information before we make any motion on what action should be taken. At least we'd have a basis.
Mm-hmm. That's fair, Don.
I'm sorry.
I'm wondering if a motion can be recalled so that we can sort of, or should I restate it more in favor of what Don is suggesting? Because it can be recalled. I think it is a bit of an incomplete motion.
I would just say before we do anything else, one of the concerns that I have with it is that I would hate to green light other kids to be pepper sprayed. Because it sounds like we want to protect these here, but go ahead and spray all you want other kids. Obviously, we're not saying that, but it gives this importance to a specific population that obviously needs special care, which they're getting already. But it opens up another one of my concerns here that also Sean is listing here about. He didn't say privacy, but I'm sure one of the pushbacks might be this is an issue about privacy altogether, about who's under what classification. But Garcia Laser.
Yeah, so what else I'm thinking of is, especially considering all these other cooks that are in this kitchen, so to speak, like what is particularly under our purview that we can do without asking anybody else to do anything, just do it ourselves. And, shining a light on things is the one thing that is really completely within our control. So if we have enough statistical data to identify already that there are certain units that have been disproportionately OC spray has been disproportionately used in. Like rather than trying to study all of the OC spray and create some sort of proportional, like if we already know that, why don't we focus really in detail on those units and track exactly what's going on in those units, you know, in the most granular detail possible. And if we can't share that information publicly because of privacy concerns, well, you know, let's find out. I would say talk to county council and see what is the farthest we can push this in terms of public reporting of exactly what's going on in the places where pepper spray is being used the most.
Thank you. Don, you're up again.
Yeah, Commissioner, Sean's right. I had a bad day here. You know, because if I recall, the OC report did highlight specific units that or facilities that had higher number. So he's right. Maybe we should target those first and say, what is the underlying issue? Is it a staff person, or is it how we're policy, or is it whatever's occurring in those? So yeah, I would target that. There was a number of them that were actually out of proportion to the others. So I would kind of support Sean on that one.
Yeah, I would say that was unit PQ and the girls unit. I mean, it's the same population, but they are focused, they're specific to, I think, 2 or 3 units. 1 at Barry J and 2 at Central, I believe. I forget. But yeah, I don't know if this even needs a motion for us to request that information, just for us to do a deeper dive for the data so that we can decide if we're focusing on those 2 units where we go from there. But yeah, I'm happy to recall the motion for the phase out. At least for now, I am.
Doctor, you're up.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to maybe connect some dots. Just for example, at Central Juvenile Hall, the youth are categorized by, you know, some of these things that we're talking about here by, you know, girls units, developmental disabilities. So the assignments of units are consistent with some of these labels we're talking about, just to remind folks.
Thank you, Dr. Reynoso. I had a, I guess I don't have it anymore. I had an idea, but Alex or Wendy, if Vice Chair Jackson wants to pull back this motion, does it have to go through? Can we present it?
I think if she doesn't want to go forward with the motion anymore, does there have to be a vote on it, Alex? Alex is having trouble with her audio.
Hi.
Danielle, did you want to opine?
I was just gonna say, I don't think we voted. You guys voted on it, is that correct?
No, it was just moved and seconded.
I believe she can withdraw it.
Great. But that's my understanding as well. So that sounds good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess the floor is still open to comments and questions about Wendy's report. So if anyone else has anything to say about that, I see Sean's hands up.
Yeah, actually, I'm still thinking about the last thing. So the idea that Don seems to think was a good one of mine. So I'm trying to pursue it a little bit. What we're really talking about here is, well, staff. What capacity does staff have to be the ones to shine this light? What obstacles will they have? So, I mean, I don't know, are we talking about having Sarah drive down and physically inspect use of force reports once a week? How does that work? So I was gonna ask Wendy, if you have any thoughts about that, or even without a motion, are you willing, based on this conversation, to come back and put this as part of your next report, whether or not we can do something like this?
So Sarah is definitely, go ahead, Danielle.
I'm sorry, just to, there was a second to Commissioner Jackson's motion?
Yes.
Okay, well then you do have to you do have to have a vote on it. Sorry.
You got to vote up or down. Okay. Well,
I didn't hear who seconded it. I'm sorry.
Yes.
So I second it. Can we table the motion until next meeting?
I think that also requires a vote.
Yes, so can we vote to table the motion rather than voting? I don't want to vote it down. I want to amend it at the next meeting.
Vote to table the motion. Okay.
I second that.
Okay, discussion on that? Okay, seeing no discussion. Get a vote, Wendy, please.
Thank you. Yes, and I will answer Commissioner Garcia-Lay's question after I call the roll. So we're voting to table Commissioner Jackson's motion regarding the phase out of OC spray. Commissioner Canales?
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia-Lays?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kakani?
Aye.
Commissioner Meredith?
Aye.
And Chair Carrillo.
Okay.
That's great. So we've tabled that to put that on next month's meeting agenda.
Okay, so, Sean,
okay, so can I answer Commissioner Garcia-Lay's question? So I'm just going to give you my opinion about this, and I think I speak for Dr. Gongora as well. She's actually here against my will today and not feeling well at all. So I'm not going to ask her to answer this question, but she can correct me later, and I'll let you know. So we would like more information about the specific cases, in particular with respect to some of these units. That I think echoes what all of you have been saying. And I think there are a number of ways that we could do that. Either the department could do it, and perhaps in some of the ways that Commissioner Meredith suggested, or we could do it. And I think that that's something that we could work out any issues with County Council around confidentiality to address by having staff conduct that research and information. So, and I guess I should say, Chief Fletcher didn't say no. She said it's labor intensive, therefore sort of we're not going to do it unless you make us do it, basically. And I think that the indication there from my perspective is that I don't actually like to ask the department to do work that is labor intensive unless we have a very specific reason for which we're doing that. And it sounds like you all are indicating that there's a very specific reason for which we're doing that. So I'm happy to continue to work with Chief Fletcher about how to get some of that information and use either her staff or the POC staff to facilitate that process and then report back. I can say Sarah is absolutely going to continue evaluating this data and presenting it to you in a similar format to what she did today with that update and last month with the overall report, because I think keeping eyes on this is one of the best strategies. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And if we have this on the agenda, or we now have this on the agenda for the next meeting, so I think we have a more substantive discussion and we'll be ready to move on this then. Thank you.
Sean. Commissioners, anyone else? Okay. Seeing none. Moving on to item number 9. And here we go, commissioners. Are there any matters not posted on the agenda to discuss or to place? Wait a minute. Yep. So this is for commissioners or staff. Are there any matters not posted on the agenda to discuss or to place on a future meeting agenda? And we are moving into 4 hours and 21 minutes long meeting based on my tally here. Okay, seeing none. So let's move forward. So item number 10 is an invitation for the members of the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Wendy, will you please facilitate public comments for us?
I sure will. I see one hand. Please go ahead and use the raise your hand function or dial *3 on your phone. And we'll start with Ms. Coffey. And you're unmuted. You can begin.
Okay, thank you. This particular scenario about staff retention was brought up. I don't believe it was an actual item, but this is just something that I want to put out for probation executive management and the POC as far as staff retention. Some of the ideals that I was thinking of is just basically having some transparency within the department involving the committees. Like Commissioner Jackson said, the department really don't utilize the line staff and committees. I mean, there should be like an email sent out to the staff about various committees that you can join so that you can have a voice within the department. Another thing that as line staff that is often seen is that the managers who oversee certain departments don't have experience in those particular areas that they are overseeing. And so that creates a lot of poor morale and a lot of problems within the particular area that manager is operating, making sure it runs fluently because they don't have the experience. Another thing that I would like, to mention as far as fairness in deployment, adult staff, field staff have been used as a crutch for the juvenile field for over 2 years. And there are some within the adult field, in particular, ASCOT, adult investigation, who have, their caseloads are abundant. And to me, it caused a lot of chaos, stress for these officers to be deployed to do a juvenile position when they have a lot of work waiting for them on the adult side and in the investigation unit. So that creates, problems as
Thank
far as.
you. That's your time. Thank you for that comment. Next, we'll go to Krista Newble. Krista, you're unmuted. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Let's try that again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to address the pepper spray issue that was brought up, and just to quickly explain something. At least in my perspective, pepper spray is not an easy thing to use, and it's already in the policy that it is the least restrictive measure. So to add something that says an alternative, it's already the last thing that we use unless it is an emergent situation, harming themselves or others. That's when that changes. For instance, the last time I pulled mine, which was years ago, because I no longer carry it, was in the middle of a riot. So when you say alternative, as she brought up and used that word, what is the alternative you're speaking of? Because I hear that a lot, not just with Commissioner Jackson, but with other people referencing how we shouldn't use pepper spray. We should use other things. But do you realize if pepper spray is gone, which it is going to be gone because it's a board initiative and we know that, that means that there will be hands-on happening after the talking, and there'll be hands-on, and you will have grown men going against children, or in the SYTF case, grown men going against grown men. And what does that look like? So removing that tool, or pushing to remove that tool earlier than it can be removed, because it is going to be removed, you really need to come up with the alternative that you're speaking of, because it's like presenting a problem without the solution. Pepper spray, no one wants to pull their pepper spray first. It involves getting weighed, it involves extensive reports, it involves being spoken to, it involves getting cleared. Nobody volunteers to do that on their own. Just FYI. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Next up, we have Nadine. Nadine, going to unmute you. Sorry, I don't have a last name. I'm not trying to be all familiar here. Go ahead and you can begin.
Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to kind of support Ms. Coffey's statement regarding transparency. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in the department. I'm a supervisor in the field, juvenile field, And we really don't get a lot of information. Rules are made and we don't really know where they're coming from. And I would really like to see management do open it up and have some type of recruitment that allows for all of us to petition. We have a lot of expertise on the line. We have a lot of advanced degrees that could help contribute. And it does appear that a lot of the times people are chosen by administrators that are either, it is perceived, and I'm not saying it is, but it's perceived it's like a favoritism, nepotism, or, you know, some kind of, we're not really feeling like we're all part of the team. And so I would love to see more inclusivity in the process, possibly opening it up as far as like sending out mass emails to recruit us, not just surveys, but, you know, ad hoc committees. There's just a lot of opportunity from the staff to buy in. And once you get the buy-in, I think you'll see a better morale.
Thank you, and thank you for joining. Chair Carrillo, that is the end of public comment.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, thank you, Wendy, and everyone else for your comments. As a quick reminder, be sure to follow us on social media at LA County POC. Also subscribe to our new YouTube channel by searching Probation Oversight Commission and clicking subscribe to receive reminders about our upcoming meetings. Visit our website at poc.lacounty.gov to subscribe to our email listing. It is now 4:35 p.m. Oh, no, forgive me.
It's 3:35.
I'm in New York, sorry. It's 3:30.
We're not that bad.
I joined this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Chair Carrillo.